Chapter 359. Ning Ke had never hit Sang Sang since she was 4 years old. From that day on, he was always on the losing side in countless battles with Sang Sang. For example, at this moment, Sang Sang dissolved all the sarcasm in Ning Ke's words with just one sentence and turned it into a bolt of lightning, which made him stiff all over and filled his heart with endless resentment. "What does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with me? Why does your business have nothing to do with me?" The more Ning Ke thought about it, the angrier he became. He was so angry that he trembled like Mr. Wu next door. He rolled up his sleeves and searched around the study of the Grand Secretary's mansion, like an ant on a hot pan. He wanted to find a small wooden stick and find the beautiful life before Sang Sang was 4 years old. However, there was no wooden stick in the study, and their life could not go back to the time before she was 4 years old. Even if he found it, he could not really take off Sang Sang's pants and slap her butt. So after a while, he walked back to Sang Sang helplessly and said with his head down, "Come back with me." Sang Sang whispered, "No." Ning Ke raised his head and stared into her eyes, asking, "Why not?" Sang Sang answered softly, "Because I'm not happy living there." "Why not?" "It doesn't make sense. I'm just not happy." "You're not unreasonable, you're just brainless. What does it have to do with you?" Ning Ke said angrily, "I'm the young master, and you're my little handmaiden. Of course it has to do with me." Sang Sang lowered her head and said, "You asked me to call you young master after we came to Chang'an." Ning Ke sighed softly and said sadly, "I raised you since you were little." Sang Sang raised her head and said seriously, "Not yet. After you were 8 years old, I was responsible for washing clothes, cooking and all the housework. So I raised you." Ning Ke had been preparing his emotional attack for a long time, but it was interrupted coldly at the beginning. He did not even have the chance to say anything like poop or pee. This feeling was very uncomfortable, as if he choked on hot and sour noodle slice soup. He suddenly realized that Sang Sang was not a person from the city of Wei, nor was she a senior brother or sister from the academy. She was the person who knew him best in the world, and would not be deceived by his simulated emotions. His best tricks were useless against her. He said angrily, "I earned the money, didn't I?" Sang Sang frowned and said, "But it was my idea to earn money. If I hadn't forced you to sell your calligraphy after we came to Chang'an, we would still be poor." Ning Ke's mind was not clear at this time, so he did not hear the word "we." Otherwise, he would have been more confident. But because he did not hear it, he was full of grievances and sorrow. He thought about how hard he had hunted in Min Mountain, killed the horse gang at Shubi Lake, and risked his life to kill people with Chao Shaoshu. Although it was to repay Darky's kindness, it was also to earn more money for the family. In fact, he knew very well why Sang Sang ran away from home. It had nothing to do with her finding her biological parents or anything else. After a moment of silence, he continued to roll up his sleeve. Sang Sang continued to look down at the tips of her shoes. Mrs. Zheng was shocked, thinking that he was going to hit her daughter. She gritted her teeth and rushed over, wanting to knock him to death or herself. Xing Jing hurriedly pulled his wife back. He frowned and looked at Ning Ke and Sang Sang in the study. He felt that the relationship between the two of them was not the master-servant relationship he had imagined. What was even more amazing was that the two of them seemed to be in harmony even though they were arguing. It was as if they were a complete world that no one could separate. Yes, when Ning Ke and Sang Sang were together, they were a world. This was a world where people were used to helping each other and never thought of forgetting each other in Jianghu. Now, this old world finally had a crack and was about to split or recombine. The rules of the world were about to change, but no one knew whether it would change in the direction of light or darkness, or whether there would be a big explosion and create a completely new world. Ning Ke looked at Sang Sang and said seriously, "We have to make things clear. No matter what, I will definitely get married. We can't live like this for the rest of our lives." Sang Sang looked at him and frowned slightly, as if she felt that he had said something wrong. Sorry, I was too nervous and said it wrong. Ning Ke patted his head and said again, there is no doubt that the two of us will live together for the rest of our lives. Then he continued, but I still have to get married. I know that it will be hard for you to accept it for a while. I understand how you feel now, Sang Sang suddenly asked. You said that we will definitely live together for the rest of our lives. Ning Ke answered matter-of-factly, of course. Sang Sang said, then you will get married. Ning Ke nodded. Sang Sang said, if you get married, you will live with someone else for the rest of your life. Then how will you live with me? This was indeed a problem, but it was not a problem for the thick-skinned Ning Quebec. He answered with a smile, even if we get married, we can still live together for the rest of our lives. Sang Sang looked back at Xingjing's wife and asked, are there any ministers whose sons are not married? Xingjing's wife had been shocked by the previous conversation between the two of them. As the wife of an official in the imperial court, she had never seen such a master-servant relationship. When she suddenly heard her daughter's question, she did not come back to her senses for a moment. She answered subconsciously, many officials' mansions are choosing. Sang Sang looked back at Ning Ke and said, then I will marry them. Ning Ke was stunned. He was a little annoyed, but he was also a little shy because of this annoyance. When all of these gathered together, they became shameful and angry. He scolded, how old are you? What marriage? Sang Sang said, I heard that in the Great River Kingdom, people can get married at the age of 14. Hearing the three words, Great River Kingdom, Ning Ke felt that he had lost half a head. His boldness was immediately deflated. He tried to persuade her gently, but we are in Chang'an. Sang Sang said, even in Chang'an, I can get married in another year when I turn 16. Ning Ke was stunned and said angrily, you are dark and thin, and you have been a handmaiden for more than 10 years. Do you think those rich young masters will be willing to marry you? Sang Sang stared into his eyes and said, I am the daughter of a first-class Grand Secretary, a friend of Her Highness, a disciple of the great divine priest of light, and Mr. Second of the Academy dotes on me. I have tens of thousands of silver notes in my hands. Why do you think those people are not willing to marry me? Ning Ke trembled with anger and said, it's okay if you don't mention the silver notes. Now that you mention them, I am so angry. You actually divided the silver note. Do you really want to separate from the family? Sang Sang reminded him, we are discussing about my marriage. Ning Ke waved his arms hard and said firmly, you are not allowed to marry. After he said these 3 words, the study of the Grand Secretary's mansion was silent. Xingjing and his wife had complicated expressions, while Sang Sang just looked at Ning Ke silently. Ning Ke put down his arms in embarrassment. Ning Ke looked at her eyes and finally knew that Sang Sang had grown up. She was no longer the little girl who followed him around and learned to talk. Once she grew up, she could not go back. The little girl would become a little girl, then a little girl, then a little girl, and finally a little woman. This was an irreversible process, so she had to start thinking about what would happen after she grew up, whether it was happiness or sadness. Little girls had to get married when they grew up. Could he just watch Sang Sang marry someone else? No matter if it was a skinny little girl or a young girl, or a bloated and nagging girl after marriage, or a white-haired girl lying on the bamboo chair. As long as she was Sang Sang, he could not watch her marry someone else. If he did not allow her to marry, then why should she watch him marry someone else? Ning Ke lowered his head. He was a little helpless, a little flustered, a little confused, and a little bit understanding. He understood how Sang Sang felt when she left home in the morning. He understood how he felt. However, understanding was not enough. Ning Ke's body stiffened when he thought of another sentence he heard last night. He bowed to Xingjing and his wife respectfully and asked them to give him and Sang Sang some space to talk alone. Xingjing and his wife looked at each other and sighed as they walked out of the study. I can't lie to you. I really like her. Ning Ke looked at Sang Sang, who lowered her head and said, "You don't have to ask me. I know what you want to ask. When I was a child, I did say that I liked those girls when I peeked at them bathing. When I saw Dewdrop and Lu Shui in the House of Red Sleeves, I also said that I liked them. But she is different. I really like her." Sang Sang looked down at her feet in silence. Ning Ke continued, "And I asked you about her. You also said that she was very nice." Sang Sang raised her head and said, "She is indeed very nice." Ning Ke said, "But you don't like her." Sang Sang said, "Very nice doesn't mean that I have to like her." Ning Ke asked, "Then why don't you like her?" Sang Sang looked at him and said seriously, "I don't like that you like someone else." The study was silent for a long time. Ning Ke said in a low voice, "But I have already told her that I like her." Just like many times in the past few years, he was used to getting advice or even spiritual support from Sang Sang when he encountered a really difficult problem. However, he forgot one thing. This problem involved Sang Sang herself. There was no emotion on Sang Sang's little face. There was no anger, and no crying. She looked at him and said expressionlessly, "I'm hungry. I'm going to sleep. You can go." She was hungry, so she needed to sleep. This sentence was illogical. Ning Ke looked at her and said, "I can't sleep well when you are not at home." Sang Sang did not say anything. Ning Ke said, "Then who will cook noodles for me when I am hungry?" Sang Sang did not say anything. Ning Ke suddenly said, "How about I cook noodles for you?" Sang Sang still did not say anything. After a long silence, Ning Ke said, "I'll go and calm down first. I'll pick you up tomorrow." After saying this, he turned and walked out of the study. Sang Sang walked to the door of the study and looked at Ning Ke, who was walking to the flower bed. She said, "The eggs are in the rice jar in the kitchen. Don't use too much oil when you fry them." This chapter is probably the one that I have revised the most in my life. I have gone back and forth countless times and deleted a lot of warm memories. I tried to make it as clean and transparent as possible, with details and atmosphere. This is the upper limit of my ability. Please don't dislike it, just like it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 360. Ning Ke returned to the old brush pen shop and found that the door did not creak when he pushed it open. Then he remembered that it was Sang Sang who had fixed it. He walked into the kitchen and reached into the rice jar to take out a few eggs. Then he remembered that this was the method he had taught Sang Sang when they were young. He walked to the water jar and prepared to boil noodles. Looking at the full water jar, he remembered that Sang Sang had finished all the housework before she left home in the morning. He walked out of the kitchen and stood silently in the courtyard for a long time. He still had the black umbrella on his back, the arrow box in his hand, and the hatchet at his waist. For the whole day, he had been running and standing. He did not sit down, drink a cup of tea, or eat anything. But at this time, he was not in the mood to cook noodles. He was only thinking about his own matters. The neat pile of firewood in the corner and the clean table and chairs in front of him evoked many memories. As for what exactly he recalled, only he knew. Without Sang Sang, every corner of the house had a sense of desolation. He couldn't get used to it. He couldn't help but think that he was already so lonely in just one day. How did Sang Sang spend her time alone at home during the half a year when she left Chang'an for the wilderness? There was a cat lying on the wall. The cat looked up at the stars in the night sky. Ning Ke glanced at it, pulled out a piece of firewood from the pile at the foot of the wall, and threw it over. The cat, who was pretending to be lonely, was disturbed. It turned its head and screamed angrily at him, then jumped off the wall and disappeared. Without Sang Sang's house, there was no smell of smoke and fire, and there was a chill everywhere. Ning Ke could not stay in such a house, so he left. Ning Ke went to the guest yard first. The disciples of the Black Ink Garden of the Great River Kingdom lived here. Shan also lived here. There was a large bamboo forest in the guest court. Even though it was winter, it was still faintly green. At this time, when it was illuminated by the light at night, it seemed even more tranquil. Ning Ke did not enter the guest court. He stood between the fake rocks of Jean Mountain opposite the gate of the court, silently looking at the light and the figure in the light. His eyesight was very good and he could vaguely see the silhouette of a girl by the window in the deepest wing room. She was concentrating on writing something. Was he writing the name Ning Ke, which was difficult to write well? She quietly looked at the girl's silhouette by the window for a long time. Then he turned and left, heading south of the city. South of Chang'an City, at the Yanming Lake at the foot of Yanming Mountain. Ning Ke stood by the lake and looked at the surface of the lake in silence. The ice on the surface of the lake had long melted. But because winter was still around, the ice did not completely disappear. Instead, it turned into something like willow catkins. Under the illumination of the distant lights on the opposite shore, it looked like countless soft golden threads. Thump, thump. He picked up a stone and threw it at the dim money on the lake, piece by piece, until all the ice in front of him was smashed into pieces. Previously, he had used firewood to smash wild cats, and now, he was using stones to smash ice floss. It was not because of anything else, but because he was very unhappy. He felt that his world had been destroyed beyond recognition, so he would not allow others to hide in their own world and secretly laugh at him. Throwing the last stone in his hand to the ground, Ning Ke held his waist and panted for a long time before he calmed down. Looking at Yanming Lake under the night sky, he complained in a slightly hoarse voice, "The eggs are in the rice jar, put less oil when frying them? You're not even here anymore. Why do you care how much oil I put when I fry eggs? Is there anyone as stingy as you? The eggs are in the rice jar, and the water is in the water jar. Why don't you say the rice is in the pot? Where are you? What do you mean by you're supporting me? I've killed the horse gang and robbed the hunters. I've done all the evil things in my life. I've painstakingly robbed some silver and I've given it to you. In the end, you're the one supporting me? Don't say that I spend a lot of money. Did I drink when I was in the city of Wei? Gambling, it was indeed gambling, but wasn't it also to increase the family's income? When did you see me drinking and whoring? When did I ever give money when I visited the brothels in Chang'an? Are you still not satisfied? Ning Ke looked at the big lake under the night sky, held his waist and stretched out his index finger. Like a shrew, he scolded angrily, "What do you mean I can't marry you even if you don't let me? Tell me clearly, what are you trying to do? You little girl, what do you want? Tell me clearly. You're asking me if I've ever thought about marrying you? Well, I admit that sometimes I've thought about marrying you when you grow up. But you're still a little girl. It's okay to think about it, but can you really say it? If I really say it, what if you're so shy that you want to chop me with a chopper? Even if you don't chop me, who knows how many people want to chop me? And even if I want to marry you, it won't affect me from liking other people, right? Why should I like others? Hey, I like to eat meat, but it doesn't mean I don't like to eat shrimp. Humans are omnivores. I like to eat more, so what? What can you do to me? Then what about you? You eat with me. What did you say? I like women. Are you going to like women with me? Well, it doesn't seem to make sense. The hoarse voice kept ringing in the quiet lake. In the Grand Secretary's mansion, such a conversation would never happen, because Ning Ke did not dare to say these words to Sang Sang. He knew that if he really said so, the stubborn girl would definitely turn around and leave, not giving him any chance to save the situation. And Sang Sang would definitely not ask those questions. But he knew what she wanted to ask. So he could only stay at the foot of Yanming Mountain in the middle of the night, by the quiet lake. He could not understand and could not refute the lake water. His voice startled the lake birds. The Grand Secretary's mansion was quiet at night. The lady's boudoir, which had been prepared a few days ago, was decorated luxuriously. Her makeup box was filled with cosmetics from Chenjinji Cosmetics Store. Sang Sang used to love cosmetics from Chinjinji Cosmetics Store. But today, she did not even look at them, nor did she pay attention to the complicated greetings of the maids. She just looked at the bronze mirror silently. The bronze mirror was very smooth, and there were complicated flowers and plants engraved on the side. One look and anyone could tell that it was an expensive item. Sang Sang did not look at the bronze mirror. She only looked at the face in the mirror. It was a small, slightly tanned face. Her brows and eyes were plain and unremarkable. Her hair was clearly a little yellow and soft due to malnutrition. Her pair of bright willow leaf-shaped eyes had also become a little dim. No matter how one looked at it, this small face could not be considered beautiful. It could not even be considered delicate. "You're really ugly." Sang Sang looked at herself in the mirror and said. From hearing Ning Kei's words last night, to leaving the old brush pen shop in the morning, to meeting Ning Kei again in the afternoon, she did not cry. She did not even show any expression of sadness, because she had been reminding herself not to cry, no matter what. Those weak and slender young ladies could hold flowers and shed tears because they were beautiful. But even though you are weak, you are so ugly. What right do you have to cry? Sang Sang rarely looked in the mirror because she did not care about her appearance other than being white. And because Ning Kei, as a man, did not know how to dress up a little girl. When they were in Min Mountain, the little girl would occasionally look at her face in the still water in the stream. When they were in the city of Wei, the little girl would wash her face and comb her hair in a wooden basin. When they came to Chang'an, Ning Kei bought her a powder box, and she finally had a mirror. But the mirror in the box was too small, and it was difficult to clearly reflect the whole face. So Sang Sang felt that the small dark face in the bronze mirror was a little strange. She felt that the person in the mirror was a little strange. She suddenly felt that the person in the mirror was a little strange. Sang Sang shook her head and said, "You are really a very annoying child." Sang Sang in the bronze mirror lowered her head and said, "Why do you say that?" "Because you make him worry. I want to make room for him to get married. But you clearly know that he will not leave you alone, so you are forcing him to make a choice. He has been good enough to you, how can you be so cruel? But he said that he will spend the rest of his life together. Since he said that he will spend the rest of his life together, can one more person be together? Can he spend the rest of his life with one more person? Why do you have to fight with others?" Sang Sang in the bronze mirror answered sadly, "But it was originally mine." Sang Sang outside the bronze mirror said silently, "But he will be very sad. I have never fought with others, but this time is different. Even if he will be sad, even if I become an annoying child, even if I become uglier, I will still fight with him." Outside the bronze mirror, Sang Sang wiped away the tears on her face and said stubbornly like a child. The morning light was bright, and the lake at the foot of Yanming Mountain reflected a faint luster. Ning Kei stood by the lake, holding his waist and panting tiredly. From time to time, he muttered a few words. He had not eaten or drank for a whole day and night, and he had cursed at the lake for a whole night. His throat was already extremely dry, and his face was very haggard. Youngest uncle used to curse the heavens and the earth, and he was so heroic and magnificent. You curse at this small lake, what can you feel? What's more, you are still struggling with those small things. A voice sounded in the forest by the lake. Ning Kei turned to look at the fat man and said angrily, "You have been sexually abused since childhood, so you have a psychological shadow. How would you know that the relationship between a man and a woman is the real important thing?" Chin Pippi shrugged and said, "I know you are in a bad mood. I will not argue with you." Ning Kei asked, "Why are you here?" Chin Pippi said, "Because of a certain matter, the academy held a big meeting. In the end, everyone quarreled but came to no conclusion. In the end, Seventh Sister said that they should take you back for interrogation to see what you really think. But you didn't go to the academy yesterday, so everyone sent me to catch you." Ning Kei's thoughts were very chaotic at this time, and he did not understand what he was trying to say. He thought about the question that he had been thinking about for a whole night, and looked at Chun Pippi seriously and asked, I have something to ask you. What do you like to eat? Crab porridge? Chun Pippi touched the back of his head and asked, Why do you ask? Ninkei said, I like eating noodles with fried eggs the most, but if you eat crab porridge every day, will you get tired of it? Chun Pippi thought for a moment and replied, How can I not get tired of eating it all the time? Ninkei frowned and suddenly thought of a more suitable metaphor. He asked in a slightly hoarse voice, What about water? Will you get tired of drinking water? Chun Pippi said angrily, What **t question is that? If I don't drink water, I will die. Tomorrow is Saturday off. Have a good weekend. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 361. Ninkei thought about this sentence and asked seriously, If you want to eat your favorite crab porridge, you won't be able to drink water. What should you do? Chun Pippi waved his hand impatiently and said, That's impossible. Where can't I find water? Ninkei insisted and asked, What if the water has legs and thoughts and doesn't want you to drink it? It will run away when you get close to it. What will you do then? Chun Pippi was stunned and thought for a long time. He said helplessly, If that's the case, I'll drink water to survive, even though it will be painful. Ninkei looked at the morning light rippling on the surface of the lake and said sadly, Other people can have many wives and concubines. Well, to put it in a better way, other people can have many relationships, why can't I? Why did my girl learn to be jealous when she's still a child? Chun Pippi stood beside him and looked at the reflection of Yenming Mountain in the lake. He said, Don't ask me about this. I've never understood women. Ninkei glanced at him. Chun Pippi shook his head and said, Don't expect to get any help from senior brothers and sisters. No one in the back mountain has experience in this aspect. They are all geniuses and idiot. Ninkei said emotionally, I thought the most important thing in life was to be happy, but I didn't expect her to be so unhappy. It's been more than 10 years, and I don't think I've won against her once. Why? Everything in the world is good and I like it very much. But she doesn't like it and I can't do anything about it. Is this fate? Chun Pippi comforted him. Then you have to learn to accept your fate. I don't think it's comforting. Ninkei said, Oh yes, why did senior brother bring me back to the academy? Chun Pippi said, Everyone wants to know whether you want to choose Shanshan or Sangsang. But it seems that there's no need to ask now. I agree with your choice. Ninkei asked with a strange expression, Why? Chun Pippi looked at him and said, Because I knew you would choose her. Ninkei was silent for a long time. Chun Pippi frowned and rubbed his cheek. He asked with concern, How are you going to solve this? After a moment of silence, Ninkei said, When Sangsang was little, she didn't want to wash her own clothes. At that time, I taught her to do her own things. Since this is my own matter, I have to deal with it myself, and this kind of thing must be handled without any sloppiness. Chun Pippi asked worriedly, Aren't you worried about hurting her? Ninkei said with a smile, Am I not a very fickle person? Chun Pippi looked at him and said very seriously, Your smile is very fake and gloomy. Ninkei smiled sadly and did not know what to say. Chun Pippi sighed and said, The relationship between a man and a woman is indeed the most troublesome thing in the world. Now that I think about it, I really have to thank that woman, Yi Hongyu. She made me not have any thoughts about women in my life, so that I don't have to go through your troubles. The two of them walked around the lake and left Yenming Mountain, returning to the noisy streets. The morning sun was shining brightly, and the people of Chang had already woken up. There was a long queue in front of the breakfast stalls. 2 monks stood beside a steamed bun shop. One was a skinny warrior monk, whose exposed arms looked like steel. The other was a middle-aged monk with dark skin and a face full of hardships. The 2 monks were holding snow-white steamed buns in their hands, silently chewing them. There were 2 bowls of clear water on the stone slab under their feet. Their monk robes were old, and they looked indifferent. It was a sharp contrast to the bustling scene around them. It's rare to see sadhus in Chang'an. Looking at the two monks on the street from afar, Chen Pippi frowned and said, especially such powerful sadhus. Ning Ke looked at the two monks in front of him, who were silently chewing on steamed buns, and said with a sigh, all life is bitter, and all life is bitter. I thought I had suffered enough, but I didn't expect that there would be people in the world who suffer more than me. They don't even have fermented bean curd to go with their steamed buns. They really are sadhus. Chang'an was the most magnificent city in the world, and many strange people appeared every day. Even though sadhus were rare, the two of them did not care and just walked past them. As they walked past the two monks, Ning Ke glanced at the middle-aged monk. Just then, the middle-aged monk raised his head and looked at Ning Quebec. Ning Ke stopped. The middle-aged monk's gaze was calm and powerful, as if he had been quietly immersed in incense for thousands of years in front of the ancient Buddha lamp, without any impurities. The aura that the middle-aged monk exuded was also extremely calm and powerful. Even though he was standing in the bustling market with half a snow-white steamed bun in his hand, it was as if he was standing in a Buddhist land with blooming lotuses and holding a dewy branch in his hand. Chen Pippi stopped and frowned at the middle-aged monk. He suddenly said, the pure land of the human world, and you became a Buddha yourself. You came from the White Tower? The middle-aged monk put his palms together and said, I'm Dao Shi from the White Tower Temple. Greetings, Mr. 12 and Mr. 13 of the Academy. Dao Shi was a very unknown sadhu. Chen Pippi had never heard of his name. Most cultivators in the world had never heard of his name. That was because Dao Shi had been cultivating in the countryside ever since he left the White Tower. However, there was no fixed relationship between a cultivator's fame and strength. Chen Pippi looked at the sadhus who stood in the mortal world but condensed his Dharma idol outside of the three realms. He knew that his cultivation state was very powerful. Chen Pippi glanced at Ning Quebec. Ning Ke looked at the middle-aged sadhus and suddenly asked, Are you here for me? Dao Shi said calmly, Please enlighten me, Mr. 13. Since he had entered the human world, he would naturally face endless challenges. Back then, youngest uncle had relied on a sword to defeat the heroes of the world, and that was how he had built the reputation of the Academy in the world. Ning Ke had long been mentally prepared for such a situation, but he was not ready today. Because of the stories of the trip to the wilderness, because of the conflict with the flower addict, because of that hateful old woman called Cuny Maddie, Ning Ke did not have a good impression of the Ueluan Kingdom and the White Tower Temple. However, after the battle with Monk Guan Hai a few days ago, his impression of the Buddhism disciples had changed. He looked at the middle-aged sadhus and said sincerely, I have something important to do today. Master, can you wait for a few more days? Dao Shi said calmly, Buddhism pays attention to fate. I have traveled thousands of miles from Ueluan Kingdom to meet you in this bustling Chang'an city. How can I miss this chance? Ning Ke frowned slightly. Chen Pippi looked at his haggard expression and knew that he had been restless these 2 days and had not rested well. He could not help but shake his head. He looked at Dao Shi and said with a smile, Let me do it? Dao Shi said seriously, I am not a match for Mr. 12. Chen Pippi was startled. He was so angry that he laughed and said, If you want to challenge the Academy, what's the difference between me or youngest brother? Do you monks care about your face or not? A smile appeared on Dao Shi's dark face. He said, As a servant of Buddha, why should I care about my face? From yesterday morning until now, Ning Ke had not slept, eaten, or drunk any water. He was tortured by fear and frustration. He stood by the lake and cursed for an entire night, but it did not make him feel any better. That was why he was annoyed, extremely annoyed. Listening to the White Tower Temple monk's words, Ning Ke became more and more annoyed. He was so annoyed that he could not breathe, so annoyed that he was about to collapse. He was so annoyed that he directly said, I admit defeat. The middle-aged monk said, "It's meaningless to admit defeat before the battle." Ning Ke looked at the middle-aged monk's dark cheeks and the crisscrossing wrinkles on his face. After a long silence he said, "Then choose a place." The middle-aged monk said, "Buddhism pays attention to fate. Since I have met Mr. 13 here, then let's do it here." Ning Ke looked at the passers-by around him, and at the child who was holding a hot bun and tearing paper. His voice gradually turned cold as he asked, "Have I offended you?" The middle-aged monk replied calmly, "You and I have never met." Ning Ke continued to ask, "Then why do you have to torture me like this?" The middle-aged monk looked into his eyes and said, "In the wilderness, Mr. 13 humiliated my aunt." Ning Ke frowned slightly and said, "You are not Yang Guo." Chen Pippi moved closer to him and said in a low voice, "Although I don't know who Yang Guo is, it seems that you have successfully aroused his desire to fight. I have to remind you that there are many inexplicable aspects of the Buddhism sect. This sadhu walks the path of Lotus Pure Land. You may not be able to defeat him. Why don't we just leave? Since I am here, he will not dare to stop you by force." Ning Ke turned to look at him and said, "Don't you think that he has aroused my desire to fight?" Chen Pippi asked, "Why do you want to fight?" Ning Ke answered, "Because I am annoyed." The middle-aged monk looked at Ning Ke and smiled slightly. He put down the bun in his hand. Even if it had been 1,000 years, it would still be a bun in the end. In front of Ning Ke's eyes there was a bun, and a grave. The lone grave became clearer and larger in his eyes. Gradually, it covered the fog rising from the breakfast stalls by the street and the smiling faces of the children happily holding their meat buns. Ning Ke was not frightened. He knew that the disappearance of the real world in front of him did not represent the real thing. It was just that he had been dragged into the middle-aged sadhu's spiritual world. The middle-aged monk turned out to be a psyche master. A psyche master could directly use his psyche power to attack the enemy's sense of perception. He could use his psyche power to control the chi of heaven and earth to directly attack the enemy's internal organs. It was invisible and hard to guard against. It was very powerful. The cultivation world had always known that among cultivators of the same state, a psyche master was the most powerful. Ning Ke had met a psyche master before. The first cultivator he met in this world, Liu Qinchen, was a great psyche master in the see-through state. But he had never fought with a psyche master. He had never imagined how powerful a psyche master in the Buddhism sect could be. The lonely grave in front of him was getting closer and closer. The real world was getting further and further away. Ning Ke's sense of perception was empty and dark. On the street in the real world, he closed his eyes, pulled out the hatchet from his waist, and chopped at the bald man in front of him. In front of the grave in the spiritual world, he opened his eyes, pulled out the padao from his back, and chopped at the grave in front of him. The frustration and killing intent accumulated for a day and a night. All of it was in this one chop. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 362. Ning Ke had no experience in fighting with a psyche master. But he had a lot of fighting experience. So when the quiet and joyful street in the morning, the steaming steam from the bun shop, the happy children, the dull adults, and the whole of Chang'an disappeared in front of him, he did not panic. Instead, he made the fastest reaction. He closed his eyes and pulled out the hatchet at his waist. He recalled the last scene he saw before he closed his eyes and chopped forward according to the traces left in his mind. The blade broke through the wind. It was not sharp, and the blade still had wood shavings from the old brush pen shop. It accurately chopped between the middle-aged monk's eyebrows, not even one eyebrow away. The grave in front of Ning Ke was very far away, thousands of miles away. But it was very close, right in front of him. He pulled out the slender padao behind him and chopped down. The blade, which seemed to still have grass shavings from the Shubi Lake, accurately chopped the grave. From thousands of miles away to one step in front of him, he did not miss an inch. However, this seemingly unstoppable chopping fell on the lonely grave, but it could not cut it open. Countless sparks flew between the blade and the grave, forming a line of fire. There was a gap on the slender Padao waist. On the street of Chang, and in the morning, the middle-aged monk did not seem to see the hatchet chopping toward his eyebrows against the morning wind. He looked forward calmly, his eyes focused and firm. The skinny warrior monk who had been standing beside him turned his wrist, and an iron staff made of refined iron whistled through the air. The end of the staff was deeply inserted into the bluestone, and the body of the staff blocked in front of the knife. There was a dull sound of collision. Ning Ke closed his eyes, bent his knees slightly, and stood on tiptoe. He used the rebound force to float half a foot to the middle of the street. He held the hatchet horizontally in front of him, his wrist slightly trembling and his face slightly pale. Chen Pippi, who was watching the fight, frowned slightly. A psyche master or a sword master walking in the world would always be accompanied by a martial cultivator with strong close combat skills. This arrangement had already become a recognized rule in the cultivation world. The skinny warrior monk helping the middle-aged monk deal with the threat in close combat did not violate the rules of the duel. Chen Pippi did not know that Ning Ke's understanding of the rules of the cultivation world was close to that of an idiot. He was not angry at the fact that two monks from the White Tower Temple attacked Ning Ke alone. The reason why he frowned had nothing to do with the skinny warrior monk's attack. It was because of the pedestrians on the street and the scenery. The child was still happily tearing the wet paper that was softened by the steam from the meat bun. The man in the bun shop was still there, coldly and proudly collecting the copper coins and sorting the buns into the bamboo baskets of the neighbors. The sound of his collecting was even quieter than the steam coming out of the steamer. Among the neighbors surrounding the steamer, some were angrily reprimanding the outsiders who cut the queue, some were talking about the results of last night's card game with their neighbors, and some were talking about a certain rumor in the palace in a low voice. When the freshly taken buns were served, all the conversations stopped abruptly and turned into a lively scramble for the buns. No one noticed the two foreign monks on the street, and no one noticed that two teachers from the back of the mountain of the academy had appeared in the human world. No one even noticed that there was a silent, tragic and dangerous duel going on the street. The street was still noisy and lively, so it was peaceful and joyful. This was no longer the case of being in the mortal world and being outside the three realms. Instead, it was using Zen to move the mind and build an iron threshold in front of the common people. Chen Pippi did not expect the nameless middle-aged sadhu from the White Tower Temple to have such a strong state of Zen psyche. He could not help but start to worry about Ningquebec. Ning Ke floated back a few steps. The lonely grave that was thousands of miles away became clearer in his eyes. The grave was made of ordinary bluestone and clay. There was nothing special about it. However, there was not a single mark left on it when he slashed it with his knife. Thousands of miles of lonely grave, there was nowhere to talk about desolation. Looking at the lonely grave, he felt more and more desolate and cold, as if the heat in his body was escaping into the air. However, standing in the spiritual world, there was no real body. Ning Ke looked at the lonely grave that was thousands of miles away. He knew that the coldness and loneliness coming from the grave were the means of the middle-aged monk's psyche power attacking him in the spiritual world. This kind of Buddhism sect method was very clever and could even be said to be magical. The middle-aged monk's psyche power seeped in wisps like the spring breeze and rain. It was peaceful and upright to the extreme, but it was also dangerous to the extreme. It was the silent meaning of expiation, making you sing and dance with it, or meditate with it, or fall into your emotions and be unable to extricate yourself. If it was someone else, even if their mind was purer and stronger than Ning Ke's, facing such a Buddhism sect Zen psyche attack, they might not even know how to deal with it. However, Ning Ke had once passed through the spiritual world of Master Lotus. Master Lotus was well versed in Buddhism, Taoism, and the Devil's Doctrine. He had chanted sutras in the Xiankong Temple and was a Dharma protector of the front gate of the Buddhism sect. His academic achievements were shocking. Although he was already dying when he passed through the spiritual world of Ningke, and his psyche power was far weaker than the middle-aged monk from the White Tower Temple, his spirit and state were much stronger than the middle-aged monk's. The kind guidance hidden in his Zen psyche was even more charming. It was difficult for a swimmer who had fought in the sea and stormed to drown in a stream. He had seen the wonderful state of a 70-petaled lotus, and every petal was fragrant. How could he be affected by a grave? Ningke was expressionless in front of the loneliness of the lonely grave. He was unmoved and expressionless. He guarded his heart and silently concentrated his psyche. He abandoned the knife in his hand and used his psyche power to create terrifying invisible knives bigger than mountains in the air. He slashed at the grave again. No matter how hard the lonely grave was, it was instantly broken. It was not broken by the knife, but by the mountain-like knives. The hot steam from the bun shop was blown to the street by the wind and the crowd who were carrying the buns. The white steam shrouded the middle-aged monk and Ningke's bodies. It was as if the clouds were suddenly not in the human world. Ningke loosened his right hand and the hatchet slipped from his hand. It fell to the ground and made a soft sound. He closed his eyes and stood in the sea of clouds in the human world, silent and motionless. The middle-aged monk's face suddenly turned pale and his body trembled violently. It was as if he was going to lie down in the sea of clouds at any time and never go back after getting drunk. The palms that were joined together slowly and firmly came together. The steam and clouds on the street gradually calmed down. The middle-aged monk finally stabilized his body and did not fall. The lonely grave was crushed into countless gravel by Ningke's knife and flew all over the sky. After the rain of gravel, a huge stone Buddha that was dozens of feet high appeared in the air. The stone Buddha had a kind face and a compassionate expression. There seemed to be thunder and lightning brewing in its open eyes. It was indescribably indifferent and majestic, full of sorrow and anger towards the person in front of it. Sorrow and anger seemed to be two emotions that could not be reconciled. But at the same time, the stone Buddha's face was perfect. Pity for his misfortune and anger for his incompetence. The stone Buddha's lips were tightly closed, like a shallow line carved by a knife, as if it had not opened its mouth for thousands of years. Ningke looked at this line and thought of the beautiful thin red lips of the girl in white. The stone Buddha did not speak. But a Buddhist hymn sounded between heaven and earth. It was a monosyllabic word with an unknown meaning, but it was powerful and ancient. The gravel fell violently like rain and hit the ground. Ningke looked up at the sky and saw the falling stones, not knowing how to deal with it. The sky full of gravel fell like rain, landing on his body, landing on his face. The pain of his real body was clearly transmitted to his sense of perception, making him realize that every part of his body and his internal organs were suffering from the attack of the qi of heaven and earth. At this moment, he thought of the scene where Liu Qinchen killed the scholar at the entrance of Northern Mountain Road. The scholar had already joined the devil and died. Ningke had joined the devil, but he had really joined the devil. How could the attack of the qi of heaven and earth kill him? So there was only pain, nothing else. The steam from the bun shop was still drifting to the street. The middle-aged monk stood among the clouds, his eyes becoming more and more serene. In the deepest part of his eyes, a burning light began to condense and burn. The burning light was shock, anger, and killing intent. He did not expect that Ningke from the academy, who had never been famous for his psyche power, could have such a powerful psyche power. When he attacked Ningke's sense of perception with his psyche power, Ningke could so easily dissolve the silence of the lonely grave. However, what shocked him more was that the stone rain in the spiritual world was a direct attack on the cultivator's body by the qi of heaven and earth controlled by his psyche power. Even so, he could not hurt Ning Ke. With such a horrible physical strength, and obviously not formed by the protective genuine chi of a powerhouse at the peak of martial arts, there was only one reason, and that was the source of the middle-aged monk's shock and killing intent. The middle-aged monk's palms were originally put together, but now they gradually separated. He dug a bloody hole from his right palm with his left index finger. Then he tore off a piece of flesh expressionlessly. After that, his dark cheeks became paler, and his eyes showed signs of aging. His wrinkles were like layers of garbage washed away by the rain, and he looked extremely withered. He slowly smeared the blood and flesh from his right palm onto the withered face. This was not the evil skill of the devil's doctrine, the blood emblematic gesture. It was the most powerful and decisive blood offering to Buddha of the Buddhism sect. A disciple of the Buddhism sect who used this skill, no matter how high his state was, would most likely die. No disciple of the Buddhism sect would use such a method that violated the mercy of the Buddhism sect, if not for the collapse of the mountain gate or the enmity of 1,000 generations. When the middle-aged monk smeared the blood on his face, Chun Pippi immediately reacted. He was extremely shocked, wondering what kind of hatred did this person have for his youngest brother that he wanted to kill him. At such a dangerous moment, as a disciple of the academy, he did not care about the rules. The loose academy uniform on his body fluttered even though there was no wind, like a flag. He slightly bent his index finger, and the natural stream magical finger was about to attack the middle-aged monk according to the no-boundary spirit of the academy. However, something happened at this moment. That thing stunned Chun Pippi for a moment. And the victory or defeat of a battle in the spiritual world often only needed a moment. Happy face, wait for me to go home, I have been really busy recently, and try to finish it as soon as possible. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com and vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 363. Chun Pippi looked like a harmless, cute, and fat young man, but in fact, he was a very great person. So when he was determined to do something, if there was something that could make him lose his mind for a moment, then that thing must be something very great. When his loose academy uniform fluttered despite the lack of wind, and he raised his right arm to point a finger at the middle-aged monk, the skinny warrior monk who had been silently guarding the middle-aged monk all this while appeared before his finger. His face, which seemed to be carved out of steel, was indifferent and emotionless. Chun Pippi's cultivation state was extremely high, but the warrior monk reacted faster than him. It could only mean that he was prepared and knew that the middle-aged monk would use the merciful and cruel Buddhism sect's blood sacrifice. It also meant that even if the middle-aged monk did not discover that Ning Ke had joined the devil, he had already planned to destroy Ning Ke by subduing the devil during this trip to Chang'an. However, even if the skinny warrior monk was prepared and reacted extremely quickly, appearing in front of Chun Pippi's finger, he still could not stop the natural stream magical finger released by the Academy's no-boundary spirit. Because his face and his body seemed to be as hard as steel, but he was still a mortal. So the warrior monk did not hesitate to pull out a sharp knife from his sleeve. He did not stab Chun Pippi, but fiercely stabbed into his lower abdomen. With a puff, as if an arrow had pierced through a full skin bag filled with water, the sharp knife stabbed deep into his abdomen. The warrior monk's face suddenly turned pale, but his eyes were still firm. Without any hesitation, he held the knife handle tightly with his right hand and pulled it down. With a splash, blood flowed out. The warrior monk's intestines also flowed out from the cut made by the knife along with the blood, giving off a faint heat and a pungent smell of blood. The warrior monk's left hand was placed under the wound on his abdomen, holding the increasingly flowing intestines. He looked at Chun Pippi indifferently, as if he could not feel the pain coming from that place. A drop of blood fell on Chun Pippi's fingertip. He stared at the scene in front of him, not knowing what the other party wanted to do. Chun Pippi had never killed anyone before. He had never even participated in a real battle. He had never seen a battle to the death, and he had never seen such a bloody scene. In this life, he had only fought with Wang Jinglu in the winter garden of the Chang'an mansion a few days ago. Relying on the insurmountable gap in cultivation, he won easily and easily. Chun Pippi had always thought that battles between cultivators should be so casual and casual. But today, when he saw the bloody scene of the warrior monk holding his intestines, he finally understood that a true battle had nothing to do with one's realm and strength, much less one's demeanor and bearing. It was only about victory and defeat, as well as life and death. This warrior monk only wanted to disturb his mind a little, yet he didn't hesitate to sacrifice himself for a righteous cause. What kind of spirit and boldness was this worthy of respect or fear? The warrior monk's face was extremely pale. He looked at Chun Pippi indifferently and said with a slightly trembling voice, "Mr. Twelfth, please understand the rules." These two monks from the Yueluan kingdom had indeed made ample preparations for their encounter on the street today. They knew very well that the second floor of the academy had never been a place that cared about rules in history. That was why they did not hesitate to gamble with their lives to try to shake this unruly rule. For Chun Pippi, the bloody scene in front of him and the pink intestines in the warrior monk's left hand were undoubtedly an extremely shocking education. This kind of shock might not be able to change his views on rules formed by the Academy's education, but it was enough to startle him for a moment. That moment was enough, because it only took a moment for the battle between the middle-aged monk and Ning Ke to end. The middle-aged monk's strength lay in his ability to subdue demons with a single thought. Chun Pippi's fingertips trembled slightly in the morning breeze of Chang'an. At this moment, the middle-aged monk's psyche was all focused on Ning Ke, and he had no defense at all. He only needed to touch him lightly to kill him. However, he knew that the invisible battle was over, which meant that Ning Ke was already dead. If his youngest brother was dead, what was the point of doing anything else? Chun Pippi's cheeks trembled, and he seemed to be in extreme pain. He decided to kill the two monks in front of him later. Although he had vaguely guessed that there was something wrong with the middle-aged monk's background. Although he had never killed anyone in his life. But according to eldest brother's words, Ning Ke, who would not be short-lived, had died in such a short time. Then was there any principle or rule that must be followed in this world? The fastest thing in the world was not fog, rain, or wind, but lightning. People often use the term, faster than lightning, to describe psyche. When psyche moved, no time could catch up with it. Therefore, in the spiritual world, a lot of things could happen in a flash. When the middle-aged monk dug his blood and smeared it on his face, and performed the blood-nourishing dharma, the space where Ning Ke's psyche was located suddenly had many shocking scenes and changes. The stone Buddha, which was dozens of feet high, had been standing silently behind the rain of stones. The straight line under its nose, which had not opened for thousands of years, suddenly opened at this moment, and then there was a mouth. 2 streams of blood, as thick as iron, flowed from the corners of the stone Buddha's mouth. The 2 streams of blood did not drip to the ground, but ignored the rules of space in the real world and spread in all directions, gradually covering the huge face of the Buddha. As the thick blood spread, many deep cracks appeared on the face of the stone Buddha, like cracked dry earth. However, soaked in blood, it looked more like thousands of bloody wounds on the bodies of thousands of people. An extremely powerful pressure spread from the stone Buddha and spread throughout the entire space. The solemn face of the stone Buddha was covered with countless tiny wounds. Soaked in blood, it should have looked ferocious and bloody, but instead it looked more and more pitiful, as if the golden paint of an old temple had fallen off, leaving only mottled vicissitudes. The blood on the face of the stone Buddha became thicker and thicker, and the supreme compassion became stronger and stronger. All the bloody war, separation, and all the negative emotions in the world seemed to be absorbed by the Buddha's face. Only an extremely clean and pure world was left behind. The dirt and stones that kept falling from the sky were purified and turned into white holy lotuses that filled the sky. They turned into countless petals that fell on Ning Kei's body like a rain of petals. A petal fell on his cotton jacket silently, but it quietly tore open a hole. Blood seeped out like hot and sour noodles and red soup that overflowed from the edge of a bowl. Ning Kei looked up at the sky and frowned slightly. With a thought, he mobilized the Great Spirit in his body and spurted it out from between his eyebrows. Wherever the Great Spirit went, all the lotus petals that came into contact with it would shatter. However, the sky was full of rain and flowers. There were too many lotuses, so how could they be completely isolated from the sky? The lotuses bloomed one after another, and their petals fell on his face and body. They cut open his cotton jacket and drilled into his skin, scraping off his flesh and bones. Endless pain seeped into his bone marrow and then exploded in every part of his body. Finally, it gathered in Ning Kei's brain, causing his sense of perception to shake like a tide. He was in extreme pain. Feeding Buddha with blood was a powerful method of the Buddhism sect. However, the stone Buddha, whose face was covered in blood after the rain of petals, actually meant sacrificing himself to become a Buddha. Sacrificing himself to become a Buddha and temporarily creating a pure land of lotus to purify all evil spirit. This method had already exceeded the scope of the ordinary Buddhism sect methods in the world. It was the supreme state of the unworldly world. Only those with great perseverance, determination, mercy and evil could enter this wonderful state. Even Chun Pippi, who had already entered the knowing destiny state, would face great trouble if he was sent into this pure land of lotus by the Vedanta of the Buddhism sect. He had to deal with it very carefully. Moreover, Ning Kei had just broken through the see-through state by the Daming Lake. His state and his state of mind were not enough to see through the lotuses that filled the sky. The petals that filled the sky revealed a very clear intention of destruction. Ning Kei looked at the stone Buddha in the distance through the curtain of blood dripping from his eyelashes. After a moment of silence he asked, "So you wanted to kill me from the beginning? This matter has nothing to do with me entering the human realm on behalf of the Academy, nor does it have anything to do with you knowing that I have joined the devil in the wilderness. You just want to kill me. So I don't understand. Even if you are from the Xiankong Temple, can you bear the consequences of killing me?" The huge stone Buddha grinned with blood dripping from his mouth. It seemed to be laughing happily, but also crying sadly. It did not answer Ning Kei's question, and just kept silent. "This is a duel that happened in Chang'an. I killed you in a fair environment. There will be no trouble. The Tangs care about their reputation, and the Academy cares about their reputation even more. They will not vent their anger on Yueluan or the Buddhism sect. On the contrary, in order to maintain their hypocritical spirit, they will keep silent." The middle-aged monk's voice sounded outside the rain of petals. "Moreover, it has been confirmed that Mr. 13 has joined the devil." Ning Kei, who was covered in blood, looked out of the rain of petals and asked bitterly, "But before you knew I had joined the devil, you were already prepared to kill me. Why? What have I done to the Buddhism sect to make a Vedanta like you decide to come to Chang'an to kill me? I have said that you humiliated my aunt in the wilderness. Then you have humiliated Yueluan and the Buddhism sect." Ning Kei said sarcastically, "I always thought that most people in the world are idiot. I did not expect that someone would dare to treat me as an idiot. How can that old woman Kuni Mati make the Buddhism sect dare to offend the Tang Empire and the Academy?" The middle-aged monk's voice was calm and firm. "Of course there are other reasons. But when you humiliated my aunt in the wilderness, today's ending was destined." Ning Kei wiped off the blood on his face. When his sleeves brushed past the deep wounds caused by the lotus petals, he felt an unbearable pain. However, he smiled. "Monk, is your surname really Yang?" Ning Kei held his stomach and laughed out loud. Looking at the stone Buddha outside the rain of petals, he wiped his tears and blood and said with a smile, If this turns out to be a romantic drama in the end, I will be so disappointed. There are many things that you do not know. Then can you tell me? No, since you have joined the devil, then I only need to kill you. The middle-aged monk's voice sounded particularly ethereal in the rain of lotus petals, and then it turned into confusion. 2 generations of the Academy have joined the devil one after another. Is this the will of Haotian or the rotation of fate? Ning Ke did not notice the great confusion hidden in the voice of the middle-aged monk outside the rain of petals. At this time, his attention was completely focused on the rain of lotus petals. He looked at the lotus petals that fell in front of him and thought of the dream he had a long time ago. He thought of Song Song's white little feet. He thought of the countless nights that he had been kicked by her feet in bed over the years. His heart became sore, and then he began to get angry. I don't care how many reasons you have to kill me. But since you know that I have joined the devil and have made so many pairs of my Song Song's feet to kick me, I will definitely kill you. He pulled out the big black umbrella from behind and opened it. The black umbrella was like a black lotus, particularly eye-catching among the white lotus petals. He held the black umbrella and stood in the rain of lotus petals, looking at the stone Buddha in the distance whose face was covered with blood. He was like a tourist standing by the drizzling river with an oil paper umbrella, looking at the willows on the other side of the river. Then he said, "Buddha, I am coming to kill you." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 364. Unlike Monk Guan Hai of the Lank Temple, who focused on the wonderful state of cultivation, this middle-aged sadhu, who stood silently by the street drinking water in his broken kasaya and straw shoes, came to Chang'an with a very clear purpose. He wanted to destroy or kill Ning Ke by challenging the person from the academy who entered the human realm. Ning Ke had not rested for a whole day and night. He did not sleep or even sit down. He did not eat a single grain of rice or drink a drop of water. His mind and spirit were extremely exhausted. Facing such a terrifying powerhouse from the Buddhism sect, it seemed that he would die no matter how he looked at it. Yesterday morning, when he found that Sang Sang had run away from home, and it seemed that he would never see her again, Ning Ke encountered the greatest fear in his life. He even had the urge to die for the first time. When he scolded her in the middle of the night under the Yanming Lake, he also wanted to die like this. However, Sang Sang was still in Chang'an. He finally made a difficult decision. How could he die at such a moment? If he died at this time, wouldn't all the suffering he had experienced before be in vain? If he died at this time, he might as well enjoy a night in the house of Red Sleeve. The middle-aged monk wanted to kill him, but he did not want to die, so he had to kill him. After all, the white lotus flowers all over the sky could not really be Song Song's little feet. So, no matter whether it was the stone Buddha or the god hiding behind the rain of flowers, they could not stop him from holding the big black umbrella and going there. As long as it was not Sang Sang, who he could never defeat. Then, if the god stood in his way, he would kill the god. The big black umbrella was so big that it covered both eyes and the sky. The pure white lotuses slowly floated down. Some landed on the thick and greasy surface of the black umbrella and slowly melted into nothingness. Some landed on the surface of the black umbrella and were like dewdrops falling on the surface of a drum. With a snap, they sped up and bounced back into the sky. Even more pure white lotuses scattered in all directions in fear when they got close to the black umbrella. Ning Ke held the big black umbrella and walked toward the blood-stained stone Buddha in the distance. His pace was slow and steady, and his expression was calm and unruffled. He looked like a tourist who was walking on a bridge across a lake to pick willows on the other side. As he walked, the rain of petals in the sky was disturbed. Tens of thousands of lotus petals dodged the slow-moving black umbrella and escaped in all directions, forming countless turbulence. Tens of thousands of lotus petals whirled and danced in the air, flying up into the cold and lonely sky, then gently drifted down and landed on the face and body of the stone Buddha. This was because the sticky blood did not fly away after the lotus petals fell, and gradually covered the face of the stone Buddha. Pure white lotus petals covered the face of the stone Buddha. Sticky blood seeped out from the overlapping edges of the petals, making the petals look especially clear and terrifying because they were so densely packed together. Ning Ke held the big black umbrella and strolled in the rain of withered lotuses. He was getting closer and closer to the stone Buddha. The middle-aged monk named Daosher was indeed very powerful. His cultivation state and his application of the various techniques of the Buddhism sect were all very powerful. He was even as powerful as the Tao addict Yi Hongyu. However, it was a pity that he was a monk who used meditation to move people, and used meditation to kill people. The person he wanted to use meditation to kill was Ning Ke who was carrying the big black umbrella. Ning Ke did not have much fighting experience with Psyche masters. That was why he was directly sent into the Pure Land of Lotus by the middle-aged monk and entered an extremely dangerous situation. However, he relied on his powerful psyche power and the powerful physical strength after joining the devil to overcome that moment of confusion, and then he took control of the situation. In theory, Psyche masters were the most terrifying existence among cultivators of the same state. However, the big black umbrella could block all invisible Psyche power attacks, so Ning Ke, who was holding the big black umbrella, was the nightmare of all Psyche masters in the world. Ning Ke had great doubts about the reason why the middle-aged monk wanted to kill him, so he wanted to know the secret behind the scenes. That was why he used his physical body to bear the lotus, and did not hesitate to use this pain to buy time to ask questions. Or perhaps he simply wanted to make himself feel more pain. Physical pain could often relieve some mental pain or annoyance. At this time, he was really annoyed to the point of breaking down. Having made up his mind, Ning Ke did not think about anything else and revealed his killing intent. A strong killing intent passed through the umbrella handle in his hand and spread to the big black umbrella, and then to the space around him, causing the rain of flowers to scatter and cover the bloody face of the stone Buddha. Because Sang Sang ran away from home, the killing intent in his body had been brewing since yesterday morning. As he searched in Chang'an, it gradually condensed and became terrifying. At that time, it almost overturned the entire Chang'an. Last night, it was dried by the night wind by the lake until it was as spicy and hard as sausages. It could be accompanied with wine and could be used to kill. Ning Ke walked to the foot of the stone Buddha and carried the big black umbrella on his shoulder like a knife. He looked up. The face of the stone Buddha was covered with dense lotus petals, and blood seeped between the petals. The Buddha's eyes were exposed outside the petals, but the sadness and anger at the beginning had been replaced by confusion. Ning Ke looked at the Buddha's face covered with blood lotuses and was silent for a moment. His right hand hanging by his side was like a knife, and he chopped at the stone Buddha from thousands of feet away. There was no sharp sound of the knife cutting through the air. There was no knife aura that could cover thousands of miles. The sparse rain of lotus danced gently. There was no sound in front of the Buddha. However, there was a deep knife mark on the Buddha's face. The knife mark started from the Buddha's bun and extended diagonally to the lower left, cutting the Buddha's smiling lips. The lotus flowers between the knife marks were crushed into mud, and the blood slowly flowed. The confusion in the stone Buddha's eyes was quickly replaced by fear and shock. The lotus petals began to fall from the stone Buddha's face. Perhaps because of the blood, each petal that fell would pull a small piece of stone down. The lotus flowers gradually faded, and the cracks on the Buddha's face became deeper, already riddled with holes. However, the remaining eyebrows, eyes, nose, and lips all cracked and peeled off into a rain of stones, falling to the ground. It looked like the wind and rain of tens of millions of years were all condensed in this moment. The stone Buddha suddenly collapsed, shaking up some smoke and dust. A few lotus petals. Ning Ke stood in front of the pile of stones with the big black umbrella. His psyche moved for thousands of miles, which meant 10,000 years. The battle in the spiritual world had lasted for a long time, but on the real Chang'an street, only a very short moment had passed. At this moment, the warm intestine in the left hand of the skinny warrior monk who committed suicide by cesarean fell out. Chen Pipi, who was pale, thought that Ning Ke was dead. Then he decided to break his obsession and rules, and from then on began his bloody fighting career to destroy the Buddha. After this moment, a breeze came from the street. The breeze dispersed the steam coming out of the bun shop, blew the corner of Ning Ke's clothes, blew his messy black hair, and blew the big black umbrella behind him slightly. Accompanied by the morning breeze, Ning Ke's body emitted an aura. This aura was full of the smell of life, but it was also so proud and confident, powerful and awe-inspiring to the extreme. Ning Ke opened his eyes and looked at the middle-aged monk beside the shop door. With this glance, the middle-aged monk's eyebrows made a soft sound and sunk down. The sound was very soft, but it sounded especially scary on the street in the early morning. The middle-aged monk's pure land of lotus was destroyed, and the Buddha who sacrificed himself to become Buddha was destroyed. Countless psyche power was blocked by the strange big black umbrella, and his sense of perception was shattered at that moment. The middle-aged monk looked at Ning Ke in confusion, shock, despair, anger, and sadness. 2 lines of blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth, and his throat made a hoarse sound. He struggled to shout in a weak and hoarse voice, you really are Shroud." His words were urgent before he died, but he only had time to say the word Shroud. Chen Pipi's face was pale, and he fiercely flicked the wide sleeves of his academy uniform. The skinny warrior monk who blocked in front of him roared, and the sharp knife in his abdomen slashed. Blood sprayed all over the sky, and it sprayed towards Chen Pipi, trying to stop him for a moment. Chen Pipi had already been stopped for a moment. At this moment, he was so shocked that he would not give him another chance. The chi of heaven and earth in his wide sleeves vibrated, and it easily absorbed all the blood that sprayed towards him. With a tearing sound, the cuffs of his sleeves were cut into threads, and they shot out like lightning. Then, they turned into willow catkin that slightly curved and touched the middle-aged monk's dry lips, forcing the word Shroud back. Ning Ke was even more clear that he could not let the middle-aged monk reveal his secret before he died. The great spirit in his body exploded, and he rushed to the front of the monk, and slashed diagonally with his palm like a knife. The edge of his palm did not touch the middle-aged monk's neck, but there was a thin red line on the middle-aged monk's neck. However, the middle-aged monk's head tilted, and it was about to fall off. At this moment, the cloth on Chen Pipi's cuffs made a swoosh sound, and it circled around the blood line, tightly tying the middle-aged monk's head that was about to fall off to his body. The warrior monk who was holding his intestines turned pale, and he resolutely turned back and squeezed into the crowd on the street. Chen Pipi looked at the back of the warrior monk in silence, and he seemed to be hesitating. Ning Ke glanced at Chen Pipi. Chen Pipi looked up at the sky. The streets of Chang'an in the early morning were still peaceful and joyous. Some people were buying steamed buns, while others were buying buns. Children blew on big meat buns and carefully took a bite. As they chewed on the meat, they revealed happy and regretful expressions. They were happy for the fragrance of the meat, and regretful for eating it so soon. Outside the bun shop, the middle-aged monk slowly sat down. No one knew that he was already dead, and no one noticed that there was a monk in the crowd who was holding his intestines and scurrying away. Ning Ke took out the arrow box, and began to assemble it in silence. He drew his bow and nocked an arrow. He aimed at the peaceful and joyous street of Chang'an and shot a primordial 13 arrow. The talisman arrow whistled through the air, and no one knew where it landed. There were too many people on the street, and it was impossible to see clearly if the arrow had hit the fleeing warrior monk. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the distant street. Someone shouted in fear, "Murder!" Ning Ke carried the arrow box, and carried the black umbrella on his back. He walked into a side alley with Chun Pippi and disappeared. The commotion in the distance quickly spread to the bun shop. The timid but lively children screamed in panic, and called their friends to run in that direction. The boy who was holding the steaming meat buns bumped into the middle-aged monk who was sitting outside the shop when he ran past the door, and the meat buns in his hands fell to the ground. The child looked at the rolling meat buns on the ground, and was so distressed that he was about to cry. The corpse of the middle-aged monk was hit, and his head, which was fixed by the cloth, fell gently to the ground. It rolled continuously, as if it was also a meat bun. The child rubbed his eyes and looked at the monk's head. He was so scared that he cried loudly. Along with the crying, the peaceful and joyous atmosphere on the long street was swept away. After all, the Pure Land was fake. The real world was always so dangerous. I'll write less recently and try to write more seriously. I hope everyone will be satisfied. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 365. In the late winter morning, there were many quiet places in Chang'an, such as the quiet alleys between the markets, in addition to the bustling places. Ning Kei and Chen Pippi walked in the narrow alleys, and no one spoke for a long time. Chen Pippi looked at him with a complicated expression, which was hard to describe in words. What do you want to ask? Just ask. Ning Kei rubbed his pale cheeks to dispel some of the tiredness in his body. Chen Pippi shook his head. Ning Kei suddenly asked, Don't you want to know what the word mu means? Chen Pippi shrugged and said indifferently, Manipulator behind the scenes? I don't care about it anyway. Ning Kei suddenly stopped and looked up at the gray sky that was cut into pieces by the branches of the winter trees. Chen Pippi's expression was slightly strange. He also looked up at the sky, but did not see anything strange. Ning Kei looked at the sky in silence for a long time, and suddenly laughed. He looked at Chen Pippi and said, I've joined the devil. Chen Pippi did not look at his eyes, but still looked at the sky and said sarcastically, This joke is not funny. Ning Kei looked at his round face and said seriously, You know it's not a joke. Chen Pippi said, But I still think it's a joke. Ning Kei did not flinch at all. He stared at him and asked, If it's not a joke, what are you going to do with me? Until now, only Sang Sang knew that Ning Kei had fallen into the devil's doctrine by cultivating the Great Spirit in the front gate of the wilderness. Eldest brother of the academy might have vaguely known it, but he had never pointed it out. Ning Kei had once discussed the devil's doctrine with Chen Pippi. In that discussion, Chen Pippi did not hide his disgust and even disdain for the devil's doctrine. But Ning Kei still confessed to him under the winter sky, because Chen Pippi had been very kind to him before he became his 12th senior brother. He was his closest companion in Chang and besides Sang Sang. After Chen Pippi had vaguely guessed the truth, he could not continue to hide it, and he really wanted to know how Chen Pippi would treat him. Chen Pippi's response to this was very simple. After a moment of silence, he began to pretend to be stunned. I didn't hear what you said. Ning Kei got close to his ear and shouted, I am possessed by the devil. Chen Pippi was startled and quickly covered his mouth with his hand. He looked around nervously and scolded, It's not something to be proud of. Do you want the whole Chang'an to hear you shouting so loudly? Ning Kei said, I just want to make sure that you can hear me clearly. Chen Pippi picked his ears and said in annoyance, The blood that the warrior monk spat out just now went into my ears. My ears are a little uncomfortable now, so I can't hear clearly today. Ning Kei walked in front of him and began to tell him the story of youngest brother joining the devil. Chen Pippi was not willing to look at his lips and hand gestures. He closed his eyes tightly and frowned deeply. Ning Kei reached out to lift his eyelids. Chen Pippi was finally driven mad by him. He flew into a rage and roared, Why did you let me know about this? If you don't say anything, I'll just pretend that I don't know anything. Don't tell me you want me to kill you with one slap? Ning Kei said shyly, How could I bear to do that? The two stared at each other and then couldn't help but laugh. They both knew in their hearts that this matter was really over. Walking out of the side alley, there was a tea house by the street. Ning Ke was already exhausted after a night of hunger and thirst. He was seriously injured in the instantaneous battle with the middle-aged monk and was on the verge of collapse. Seeing the big teapot outside the tea house and smelling the dim sum coming from it, he could no longer walk. Sitting at the table by the railing on the second floor of the tea house, Ning Ke cleaned up all the food and tea on the table and began to stare blankly at the city of Chang, and in the morning through the window, just as he had done for a day and a night. Chen Pippi imitated eldest brother and slowly picked up the screw meat marinated in spicy sauce. He could not help but worry when looking at Ning Ke's expression. He wondered if youngest brother's sense of perception was seriously injured in the battle with the middle-aged monk and turned into a fool by the Buddha's will in the pure land of Lotus. Senior brother, can you do something for me? Ning Ke turned his gaze away from the window and looked at Chen Pippi, pleading with him seriously. Chen Pippi was startled and asked, "What is it?" "It's like this, what art?" "That's what it means." "How many and how many?" 3 and 7. As the two academy brothers were engrossed in their discussion, footsteps came from the stairs of the tea-house. The two tacitly stopped talking and looked at the stairs in silence. He Mingchi walked up with a yellow oiled paper umbrella under his armpit. He was slightly hunched and looked like a teacher in a private school in the countryside with a ruler and a scroll under his arm. 2 monks from the Yueluan kingdom died mysteriously on the street in the early morning, which naturally alarmed the officials of the Tang Empire. The Chang'an local government had no clue about it and did not know who did it. However, it did not take long for the Imperial Center administration to confirm the situation and find the culprit. Ning Ke invited He Mingchi to sit down and poured him a cup of tea. He said, "I remember that the law of the Tang Empire always respects the opinions of both parties as much as possible when it comes to challenges." He Mingchi cautiously greeted Chen Pippi and said after a moment of hesitation, "But the law of the Tang Empire does not allow a life-and-death duel, and the duel must be recorded by the government." Ning Ke said, "How can we be sure about this? As for the record, can I file it with you now?" He Mingchi smiled bitterly and said, "I'll go back and ask the office to file the duel this morning." Ning Ke toasted him with tea instead of wine and said with a smile, "Then why did you come to us?" He Mingchi put down the teacup and sighed. "The problem is that you were too ruthless." Ning Ke said calmly, "If I wasn't ruthless, I would be dead now." He Mingchi held the teacup and said after a moment of silence, "But the middle-aged monk is not an ordinary person." Ning Ke and Chen Pippi were silent. They had already guessed that the middle-aged monk had an extraordinary background and was most likely from the Xiankong temple. But knowing and confirming were two different things. Daosher is indeed not famous. Even the Imperial Center administration doesn't have many records about him. After he entered Chang, and a few days ago, if I hadn't checked some old files out of curiosity and asked about the news from the Yueluan kingdom, I would probably have thought that he was a nameless monk from the White Tower Temple. He Mingchi looked at Ning Ke and said, "Many years ago, the elder of the White Tower Temple found an abandoned baby outside the temple. The Imperial Center administration felt that it was a bit strange because the White Tower Temple was too close to the Imperial Palace and was heavily guarded. It was difficult for someone to put an abandoned baby there. That abandoned baby was Daosher. Rumor has it that monk Daosher is related to some nobles in the Yueluan royal palace. We found out that he has been reading scriptures and cultivating Buddhism in the Xiankong temple for the past few years, which indirectly proves the rumor of his origin. Everyone knows that although the ant is detestable, she has a high status in the Buddhism sect and has been secretly connected with the Xiankong temple. Moreover, monk Daosher's temperament is not similar to Aunt Cuny Maddie's. Although it hasn't been long since he returned from the Xiankong temple, he has already gained great respect in the Yueluan kingdom. This morning, Mr. 13 not only killed him but also beheaded him. I'm afraid that it will anger the Ueluan kingdom and the Buddhism sect at the same time. Ning-Ke said, I have been facing a very troublesome matter these 2 days. It involves the destruction or rebirth of my world. At this time, not to mention that the middle-aged monk might be Kunimati's illegitimate son, even if the old woman Kunimati comes herself, I will still go to hell. He Mingchi sighed and said, but his senior brother is Qin Yen, world wayfarer of the Buddhism sect. Qin Yen, the eldest disciple of the chief preaching monk of the Xiankong temple. Chen Pippi was silent because he had heard this name many times when he was young. Moreover, this name came from the proud senior brother of Westhill, so he knew that Qin Yen was very strong. Ning-Ke was also silent. The reason for his silence was simple. It was because Chen Pippi's silence reminded him of who Qin Yen was. He also had a better understanding of what kind of opponent he had angered by killing Daoshi. I'm not in a good mood today. Ning-Ke finally concluded. He ran into my blade, so he was unlucky. On the streets of Chang'an, a pair of hands held the head on the ground. This pair of dark hands had once held a food bowl, once prostrated before the Buddha, once stroked a tree silently, and more often than not, they held an iron staff and walked the world with their fluttering monk robes. This pair of hands belonged to an ordinary sadhu of the White Tower Temple. The sadhu held the head with trembling hands and knelt in front of the headless monk's corpse in front of the bun shop. It took him a long time to put the head and the body back together. The skinny warrior monk's corpse had also been found. It was placed next to the middle-aged monk's corpse. His intestines had been stuffed back into his abdomen. His chest, which had been pierced by the talisman arrow, looked extremely horrifying. The sadhu held the iron staff and knelt in front of the 2 monks' corpses. He slowly lowered his head. On the street, more than 10 sadhu from the Ueluan kingdom also knelt down and put their palms together. The early winter wind blew from the other end of the street, causing their monk robes to flutter. More than 10 sadhus' dark faces revealed a sorrowful expression, and then gradually became sorrowful and indignant. The sound of chanting rose with the wind and floated in the morning street. Many people of Chang'an city were watching from both ends of the street. As the chanting sounded, they all lowered their heads. Snowflakes fell and covered the bodies of the 2 monks outside the shop, as if trying to cover the blood stains on their necks and bodies. This was the last snow in Chang'an city this winter. Decades later, the elder of the Ueluan kingdom's White Tower Temple pushed open the door in the morning and saw a baby on a stone outside the temple. The elder bent down and looked at the baby for a long time. He smiled and asked the baby where he came from. The baby's eyes were like lacquer, peaceful and soft. His tender lips slightly opened and he answered softly, I came from. The elder was shocked and gently waved his sleeves to carry the baby into the temple. The elder gave the baby the name Daoshi, thinking that he had innate wisdom and would become a Vedanta of the Buddhism sect in the future. Unexpectedly, as he grew older, the baby became mediocre and unknown. However, he was often taken care of by the nobles in the palace. The monk Daoshi diligently cultivated and left the temple at the age of 12 to travel. At the age of 16, he returned to the capital and looked at the imperial city in front of him from the slums of the city. He gradually entered the Lotus Pure Land, but he still remained unknown. 1 year later, the monk Daoshi was guided by the nobles and resolutely went to the wilderness to enter the Xiankong temple. He studied under the chief preaching monk and cultivated Buddhism. However, he was still unknown in the world. Another year, the monk Daoshi heard of something and his Zen heart was slightly moved. He left the Xiankong temple and returned to the Ueluan kingdom. He traveled to 480 temples in the misty rain and became famous in the Buddhism sect. From the Xiankong temple to the secular Buddhism sect, there was Master Lotus decades ago. More than 10 years ago, there was Master Huangyang, the younger brother of the Tang Empire. Today there was finally Master Daosher in the Ueluan kingdom. One day the master went to Chang'an City because of something in the wilderness, something in the secular world, and something in the Buddhism sect. He met Ning Ke, Mr. 13 of the academy, by the side of the long street and passed away. I wrote the last paragraph very happily. Maybe it's my bad taste to kill a master who was supposed to be great in history when he was unknown? To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 366. He Mingshi walked out of the tea-house and looked at the falling snowflake. He was slightly surprised. He looked at the sky and then looked back at the two people upstairs. He took out the yellow oiled paper umbrella and opened it. At the table by the window on the second floor of the tea-house, Chun Pippi thought of Ning Ke's previous words that the middle-aged monk died today because he was unlucky enough to be in a bad mood. He couldn't help shaking his head and jokingly said, "Do you need someone from the unknown place to kill every time you two quarrel?" Ning Ke noticed his words and looked at him seriously. "It seems that you like my sangsang very much?" Chun Pippi said, "I occasionally visited the old brush pen shop when you were in the wilderness for more than half a year. There are many reasons why I like sangsang. One of them is that she is now the successor of the divine priest of light. After all, I am from Haotian Taoism. Of course, I will lean towards her." Ning Ke said, "In that case, you must help me." Chun Pippi said helplessly, "I must be crazy to agree to your request. I don't understand how the middle-aged monk named Daosher could find me and know that I would pass that long street when he just entered Chang'an City. I think someone needs to give an explanation for this." Ning Ke got up and left the tea-house. Chun Pippi shook his head and followed him. The two of them came to the reception yard and passed through the dense bamboo sea. Cat Girl greeted them happily, holding Ning Ke's sleeves and chattering non-stop. She excitedly told him which scenic spots in Chang'an City they went to yesterday and which snacks they had eaten. Then the female disciples of Black Ink Garden also surrounded them. Suddenly, Ning Ke was surrounded by singing and dancing. The girls of the Great River Kingdom did not know Chun Pippi's identity. But thinking that he was Ning Ke's friend, they were naturally very enthusiastic. Ning Ke listened to the girls very patiently and talked with them with a smile. When they came to the inner yard, the female disciples of Black Ink Garden dispersed. Because they knew that Senior Brother 13 came to find the Hill Master, they consciously wanted to leave some quiet space for the two of them. Before they left, they looked at Chun Pippi with a strange expression. They thought to themselves, "Why is this fat man so insensitive? Why did he follow them in at this time?" The environment of the guest courtyard was quiet and secluded. The dense bamboo forest was a little dim in the winter, but it still retained enough green. Some yellowish bamboo leaves fell on the windowsill. Emo Shanshan quietly looked at the yellowish bamboo leaves on the windowsill. Then, she turned around and lifted the brush, writing on the yellowish paper. The tip of the brush was like a bamboo leaf, sharp and delicate. Hearing the voice coming from the courtyard, she looked up and was slightly surprised. She did not expect Ning Ke to suddenly come, nor did she expect him to bring Mr. 12 from the academy. Looking at the girl in white beside the desk by the window, looking at her black hair scattered on her dress, looking at her slightly flashing thin eyelashes, and looking at her beautiful slightly round cheeks, Ning Ke suddenly had an impulse to turn around and leave immediately. Last night, he had stopped outside this small courtyard for a long time and looked at the girl's silhouette on the window for a long time. Then, he went to the lakeside and struggled for a long time. When he finally made a decision, he thought that he was mentally prepared because he had been cold-blooded since childhood. However, when he saw the girl beside the desk at this time, he suddenly felt that everything in his heart had suddenly flowed away, and he felt extremely empty. This feeling of emptiness was the feeling of emptiness and powerlessness when watching beautiful things pass by one's life. More importantly, when beautiful things came to one's life, they were heartlessly and stupidly rejected by one's self, which might hurt the other party's strong frustration and guilt. All of these finally became the word guilty. He was flustered because of his guilty conscience. As for whether there was any hidden heartache, Ning Kei did not show it at that time, nor did he tell anyone afterwards. He pulled Chin Pippi to his side. Mo Shanshan stood up from the desk and greeted Chin Pippi. Then, she looked at Ning Kei in confusion. Ning Kei coughed hard twice to clear his somewhat hoarse and stuffy throat. He reached out his hand and motioned for Mo Shanshan to sit down. Then, he squeezed out a smile with difficulty and said, "Today, we will perform a crosstalk for everyone." Chin Pippi looked at him nervously and asked, "What is crosstalk?" Ning Kei said, "It is a language art. It stresses on speaking, learning, amusing, and singing." Chin Pippi exaggeratedly said, "Oh, I see." Although Mo Shanshan had lived by the Ink Lake for a long time and was ignorant of the world's affairs, she was the smartest girl in the world. Looking at the two at this time, she vaguely guessed something. Her thin eyebrows slightly furrowed, and then she calmly sat down and said nothing. In the following time, Ning Kei continued to perform a number of crosstalks, such as speaking slyly, writing couplets, physiognomy, and conversing. He did not care if some of the segments could be understood. Anyway, he just said it according to his own ideas. Chin Pippi, who had only heard a few stories in the alleys of Chang'an City, had never heard of crosstalk, and had never participated in a crosstalk performance in a primary school. How could he continue to say anything? Anyway, he just kept saying and Why can I always only say and ah? Because you are the supporting guy and I am the teasing guy. But you clearly said in the tea house that it was 30% teasing and 70% supporting. Hey, I am not teasing you. Mo Shanshan put the delicate writing brush on the brush stand, and then calmly sat on the chair and looked at the two. When Ning Kei was halfway through the part of teasing you, she finally curled up the corner of her mouth and smiled. Chin Pippi had been nervously watching her reaction. After seeing the girl's smile, he felt his stiff body suddenly relax and said happily, "She smiled." Ning Kei looked at him and said very seriously, "Thank you for your help, senior brother." Sitting in the chair, Mo Shanshan suddenly raised her hand and pointed at Chin Pippi, saying, "12th brother supporting. The supporting guy is not skilled, so it is not funny." Chin Pippi wiped the sweat on his forehead and said awkwardly, "I just learned it, please forgive me." Mo Shanshan looked at Ning Kei and said, "I prefer it when you say it alone." Chin Pippi glanced at Ning Kei and turned to leave without hesitation, leaving the quiet room to the sparse shadow of the bamboo forest at the end of winter and the young man and woman in the shadow. After a moment of silence, Ning Kei said in a slightly hoarse voice, "Shanshan, what you said in the alley that day was right." Before he could finish his sentence, sweat poured out of his stiff body like a torrential rain, drenching his clothes from the inside out. Mo Shanshan looked at the ground in front of her, and her sparse eyelashes slightly blinked. Hearing his voice, she suddenly stood up and did not let him finish his sentence. She said softly, "13th brother, please." Ning Kei was slightly stunned. Mo Shanshan spread the yellow bud paper on the desk and placed the paperweight in a corner. She poured water into the inkstone and began to grind the ink. Then she pointed at the brushes on the brush stand and said softly, "You choose one." Ning Kei did not know what she was going to do, so he silently went forward and chose the weasel bristle brush that he was used to. Mo Shanshan looked at him and said seriously, "You promised me in the wilderness that you would write a lot of sections for me." Ning Kei recalled the situation at that time, and after a moment of silence, he said seriously, "I will write as much as you want me to write." Mo Shanshan's beautiful face showed a rare naughtiness of a young girl, and she joked, "You will write as much as I want you to write? Then how about writing countless?" Ning Kei replied bitterly, "I can't finish writing no matter what." Mo Shanshan looked at him quietly and said, "So write for me for the rest of your life." The door of the inner residence of the reception courtyard by the bamboo sea had been tightly closed from day to dusk. Ning Ke had been discussing calligraphy with Mo Shanshan and writing sections for her. When night fell and the candle was lit, the silhouette on the window became two people. From the outside, the two shadows seemed to merge into one. The candle flickered slightly. Mo Shanshan picked up a small scissors and cut the wick short. Then she walked back to Ning Ke and quietly watched him write. She knew that he was very tired at this time, but she knew that he did not need to be pitied at this time. After all, he could not write for the rest of his life, so there was no second time to cut the candle. The door creaked softly. Mo Shanshan sent Ning Ke out. Outside the door, the two bowed calmly and said goodbye to each other. After straightening up, Mo Shanshan looked into Ning Ke's eyes and suddenly took a step forward. Then she leaned forward and clumsily put her face on his chest, listening quietly. After a moment's hesitation, Ning Ke held her in his arms and gently patted her back. Mo Shanshan quietly leaned in his arms and said, "You still owe me a note." Walking out of the reception courtyard, Ning Ke coughed violently and painfully. Even if he covered his mouth with a handkerchief, he could not make the sound of his coughing become weaker. Chen Pippi knew that he was now extremely tired and had been seriously injured in the battle in the morning. He had been waiting for him outside the courtyard. At this time, seeing him coughing, he could not help but sigh and say, "You are already seriously injured, but you still have to do these things that make your mind tremble. Isn't it making your injury worse? Why bother?" Ning Ke smiled and stuffed the handkerchief into his sleeve without saying anything. Chen Pippi saw the blood on the handkerchief and said after a moment of silence, "If the calligraphy addict knows that you are seriously injured and coughing blood, will she be more moved?" Ning Ke shook his head and said, "I have already made up my mind. There is no need for her to be moved. It is meaningless except to make myself happy. It is even despicable." Chen Pippi patted him on the shoulder and said, "Let's go for a drink." Ning Ke asked, "When did you fall in love with the drink?" Chen Pippi said, "Second brother heard that you need to drink to drown your sorrows at this time, so he specially went to Professor Huang He to borrow 2 cans of double-distilled wine. Let's go and drink it now." Ning Ke smiled and thought that a person like second brother would care about these things in his life, and that Chen Pippi had been accompanying him all this time. He could not help but feel a little warm. But it was better to be alone tonight. Ning Ke refused Chen Pippi's suggestion to drown his sorrows and decided to go home to rest. However, when he walked to the entrance of Lin 47th Street, he suddenly remembered that Sang Sang was still in the scholar's mansion. The old brush pen shop was as quiet as a cemetery, and the bed was as cold as a grave. So he turned around and left after a moment of silence. Not long after, he came to the old building of Pines and Cranes in Chang'an City and asked them to prepare the most sumptuous banquet for him. Even if he did not want to get drunk, he wanted to do something very meaningless. Tomorrow is Saturday off. I wish you all a happy weekend. Next week, we will work hard to write more. Fortunately, chapters like today's that made me want to vomit blood will never appear again. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for it and vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 367. It was late at night and the building of Pines and Cranes was closed. The people in the building were cleaning up. Hearing Ning Ke's request, they reluctantly refused. However, Ning Ke was unwilling to leave at this time. He took out a thick stack of banknotes from his arms and handed one to the manager after thinking for a while. When he left the old brush pen shop yesterday, he had the mentality that he would never go back until he found Sang Sang. Therefore, he brought all his most important belongings with him, including the primordial 13 arrows and the banknote. Although there was only one banknote, the manager clearly saw the denomination of the banknote. He was shocked when he thought of the thick stack of banknotes waving in front of him. He thought that a rich guest with so many banknotes was definitely not an ordinary rich guest. He was definitely someone that the building of Pines and Cranes could not afford to offend. Therefore, he did not dare to say anything more. He obediently took the banknotes and respectfully welcomed Ning Ke into the building. Then, he placed him in a private room by the window on the second floor. Various delicacies were carried into the private room and placed on the table. Ning Ke sat by the window and looked at the night sky that was exceptionally fresh after the winter snow. He held a wine cup in his hand and slowly drank the wine. The steamed meat with bean sprouts and the wine in the clay urn became more and more delicious. Ning Ke gradually narrowed his eyes and looked at the stars in the night sky. Thinking of the entanglement of the past 2 days, he gently knocked on the urn with his chopsticks and hummed, "Can we meet again? I have been begging Buddha for thousands of years." At this moment, a voice came from the private room next door. "What kind of messy song is this? It's so bad that it's rare to hear it. The words don't make sense at all." The side of the building of pines and cranes facing the lake was set up for guests to enjoy the scenery and rest. Every private room had a small door leading to the balcony. At this time of the night, if the voice was a little louder, it could be heard through the door and windows and then to the private room next door. Ning Ke's slightly drunk singing could also be heard. Ning Ke did not know that there was a guest in the building of pines and cranes. Listening to the slightly old voice, he knew that the person should not be young. He smiled and said, "I don't think it's bad. Being vulgar has its advantages. For example, when I am drunk, I can't think of other songs, but this song comes to my mind." The guest in the next room asked curiously, "Is this song famous?" "Praying to the Buddha." Ning Ke answered, "If I remember correctly, this should be the name." The guest laughed and said sarcastically, "Buddhists cultivate themselves and don't even care about worldly affairs, let alone the trivial love affairs of mortals. Young man, if you really want to avoid these worldly troubles, there is no other way but to avoid them. It's better to seek help from yourself than to seek help from Buddha." Ning Ke found these words interesting. He looked out the window and wanted to see what kind of person was drinking and having fun in the middle of the night like him. Why did he have such leisure time? Under the starry night sky, a person was sitting on the balcony of the private room next door. Due to the dim lighting and the fact that he was leaning sideways, it was impossible to see his face clearly. However, the figure of the person was unusually tall. Even though he was sitting on an extremely wide chair, it still seemed somewhat cramped. Looking at the tall figure, Ning Ke felt that he was a little familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. However, he couldn't recall it at the moment. He frowned and tried to recall for a moment. Then he smiled and shook his head. He sat back in the chair and took out a handkerchief to cover his mouth, coughing out some blood. The dull cough echoed on the balcony of the building of pines and cranes. Ning Ke took off the handkerchief and put it back into his sleeve. After thinking for a while, he carried the wine urn and the chair to the balcony. Looking at the tall figure not far away, he said, "Do you mind if I sit here?" The man said, "This is your place." The manager of the building of pines and cranes knew that the last 2 guests were sitting on the balcony. He was a little confused about why they were not afraid of the cold, but he still carefully ordered someone to pick up the windproof lamp at the edge of the balcony. The dim light shrouded the balcony, and Ning Ke saw the man more clearly. He was wearing a very expensive crimson fox fur coat. His face was thin and his chin beard was fluttering in the night wind. He looked very much like a rich man in Chang'an. However, his aura was indescribable. Even though he was obviously an old man, he didn't look old at all from his expression and temperament. "Do you want to talk?" Ning Ke asked. The tall old man shook his head and raised the wine urn in his hand. He said, "The first thing I want to do when I return to Chang'an is to drink 3 jugs of new wine from the building of pines and cranes. I'm not interested in talking until I finish the wine." Ning Ke ignored the man and sat back in the chair. He looked at the stars in the sky and slowly drank the wine. The old man sat in the wine and looked at the night sky behind the stars in the sky. He slowly drank the wine. Ning Ke was not a good drinker. If he were to be compared with Sang Sang, it would be like comparing a stream to a vast ocean. Especially since he was injured and extremely tired, his eyes began to blur after a short while. The old man looked extraordinary, like those mysterious hermits in Jianghu. However, he was not good at drinking, and soon he began to get drunk. There were many kinds of drunkards. Some were called martial drunkards, who wanted to vent their anger by beating people, kicking trees, and smashing walls. Some were called literary drunkards, who wanted to write, copy, or show off their poems. Ning Ke did not belong to these two kinds, because he could not write poems. Therefore, he kept muttering to himself under the cover of the wine. The old man's expression was also very interesting when he was drunk. He stared at the night sky behind the stars with his bright eyes and kept whispering something, as if he was talking to the night sky. However, his face was as cold as iron, and it could be imagined that what he said was probably not good, or more likely to be dirty words. They did not look at each other, but drank together. The old man and the young man sighed at the same time. Ning Ke sighed about life. Although he had lived in the Tang Empire for less than 20 years, he had lived 2 lives and experienced so much. There were many things that he could sigh about. For example, people in the Hebei prefecture were crueler than ghosts, people in Min Mountain were crueler than beasts, people in the grassland were crueler than wolves, and it was the hardest to bear a beauty's kindness and the most painful thing in life. The content of the old man's sigh was more specific. Under the general framework of people's hearts and moral degeneration, the unscrupulous owner of a wine shop in a county added water to the liquor. Another example was that the building of pines and cranes had fallen, and the steamed meat with bean sprouts was not cooked from the black pig in the southern suburbs of Chong. Even the mud in the spring mud urn was changed, and the liquor smelled like Huangzhou mud. This is used to store liquor, not to grind ink for writing. How can you use Huangzhou mud? The old man waved his arms angrily, and his white beard flew in the night wind. The old man's voice was getting louder and louder, and Ning Ke heard it. He looked at the angry old man and said with emotion, "You really have requirements for life. But aren't you tired?" The old man frowned and said unhappily, "Since I'm alive, of course I should live well." After a moment of silence, Ning Ke smiled bitterly and said, "That's because you live a happy life, so you don't know that sometimes, as long as you can live, it is the greatest blessing in the world." The old man waved his hand as if he was driving away mosquitoes, as if he wanted to drive Ning Ke's cliché and self-pity out of the balcony. Ning Ke was drunk at this time, but he subconsciously wanted to express his life's sigh. He did not care about the old man's disdain for his behavior. "I used to think that I was an indifferent person. Later on, when I got better, I thought that I was a decisive, indifferent, and ruthless person who could make great achievements in the world and leave my name on the stone pillar. However, it was not until these 2 days that I realized that I was just a person who kept playing house in the world. Life is like playing house. After playing for a long time, you'll think it's real. Thus, the indifference and ruthlessness will be tainted by the daily necessities and become the responsibility or habit that I used to disdain the most. Maybe it's because I have been thinking since I was a child, what would she do without me, and then it became, what would I do without her? I can still live, and maybe I can live more easily. But what is easy? It's a habit. If the habit is broken, it will not be easy, because you will always feel that something very important is missing in your life, and you will always feel that your body is missing a very important part." Ning Ke turned his head to look at the old man in the chair and said with a smile, "Don't think that I said it in a romantic way. Do you know why there are always such words in the world? That's because people can always use various methods to prove that these things are really deadly things." He raised the spring mud urn and looked at the non-existent bright moon in the night sky and said, "I will not be used to it without it. Just like this night sky, whether it is the night sky 14 years ago or now, whether it is the night sky of City of Wei or the night sky of Chong, and as long as there is no moon, I will be unhappy." The old man became interested and looked at him and asked, "The moon, what is it? In the sky? I have never seen it before, nor have I heard of it before." "The moon is something that can shine. Sometimes it is round, sometimes it is curved. It appears in the night, and sometimes it sneaks out in the day. It is very beautiful. The moon can do many things, such as covering the sun, creating tides, and turning into a werewolf." Ning-Ke looked at the old man's expression and sighed. "I know you will not believe that there is such a thing. Don't look at me like that, just think that I have drunk too much." The old man said, "If I had not drunk too much at this time, I would definitely take you to the imperial astronomer and force you to use the things there to look for it at night." Ning-Ke said sarcastically, "Let's not talk about this. Anyway, such a mysterious thing will not be understood by a rich old man like you." The old man was furious and reprimanded him. "The older, the wiser." Ning-Ke replied disdainfully, "Chives are still tender and fragrant." The old man was speechless. Ning-Ke suddenly said, "Let me tell you something serious. Don't be afraid, I want to kill people." The old man looked at him in surprise and said, "You just killed 2 people in the day and now you want to kill again?" Ning-Ke was a little drunk at this time and did not hear the words clearly. He looked at the stars in the night sky and said with emotion, "Sometimes I really feel that there is something wrong with my character. Every time I am unhappy I want to kill some people." The old man looked at him and said seriously, "There is nothing wrong with your character." Ning-Ke was slightly stunned and looked at him happily and said, "You think so?" The old man said sarcastically, "But there is something wrong with your brain." "There is something wrong with my brain, but I can still do the math. I will do the math with everyone later." To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for it and vote for it. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 368. Ning-Ke was extremely disdainful of this statement. As a student of the 2nd floor of the academy and someone like Chun Pippi, he was more and more convinced that he was a genius. Because he was very tall, the old man always felt a little cramped sitting in the chair. He changed several positions before finally finding a slightly more comfortable one. He leaned against the back of the chair and supported his chin with his hand. He looked at Ning-Ke and asked, "You want to kill people when you're unhappy. Have you killed people before?" Ning-Ke put the empty wine urn at his feet and said, "I won't tell you how many people I've killed. That's against the law of the Tang Empire. But you can think about it this way." The old man shook the empty wine urn in his hand and grumbled angrily. He asked the shopkeeper to bring 2 more urns and then looked at him and asked, "But why do you want to kill people?" Ning-Ke thought for a moment and shook his head. He said, "Although I'm almost drunk and you're drunk, I still can't tell you this." The shopkeeper trotted all the way to the terrace and respectfully put the 2 urns beside the old man. Then he bowed and retreated, not daring to say a word, let alone urge him to pay the bill. He didn't know who this old man was. Even the real owner of the building of Pines and Cranes, a high-ranking official in the imperial court, didn't know the real identity of this old man. It was just that the building of Pines and Cranes had been hiding a portrait and a simple rule for countless years. The rule was that if an old man who looked like the old man in the portrait came to the building of Pines and Cranes, everyone in the building must treat the old man like an ancestor and ignore him, as if he had killed his father. This was to avoid upsetting the old man. It didn't matter even if he was not the old man in the portrait, because recognizing the wrong ancestor would at most make the building of Pines and Cranes lose some money and face. But if the ancestor came back and they didn't treat him well, then what reason did the building of Pines and Cranes have to continue to exist in Chang'an? The old man patted open the spring mud urn and happily took a sip. He said, "In fact, when I was as young as you, I often wanted to kill people." Ning-Ke looked at his face and couldn't determine the specific age of the old man, but he thought he should be very old. Then when was he young? How many years ago was it? "Who did you want to kill back then?" he asked curiously. The old man put the wine jar on the small table beside the chair and looked at the bare winter branches in front of the balcony. He said, "My mother was my father's third concubine. My father died when I was 3 years old. After that, the clan did not tolerate us. My mother took me away from the old house and wandered around. She lived a hard life and was bullied by the world. So, when I had the ability to kill, the first thing I wanted to do was to return to the old house and kill all the old women and relatives who had bullied me and my son. Then, I would dig up my father's grave, crush his bones, and scatter his ashes." He was talking about the most sinister things in the world, such as murder, arson, and extermination. The old man's expression was very calm and gentle. At this moment, he did not look like an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life, but like a child lying on top of a haystack in a valley. His childish face floated with white clouds as he recounted the events of the past. Ning-Ke looked at the old man in silence and suddenly frowned. He asked, "Did you kill him?" The old man's slender index finger tapped on the spring mud wine jar on the table, making a clear and loud sound, like the sound of a memorial tablet falling on the ground in a secluded ancestral hall of a century-old house. He looked at Ning-Ke and said with a smile, "I won't tell you." Ning-Ke was speechless. He thought to himself, "You are so old, why are you still so petty and vengeful?" "The person I want to kill. He has killed many innocent people. Of course, I am not a saint. I just want to get real peace of mind for revenge. That person destroyed the best part of my life and killed my parents who loved me the most. I want to take revenge for my personal grudge, which is similar to what you thought back then. But those people in your clan were relatively easier to kill." He continued after a moment of silence, "But the person I want to kill is very powerful, has a high position, and has a background that even I find tricky." The old man looked at him and frowned. He said, "You don't look like a person with no status." Ning-Ke smiled and said proudly, "Old man, you are really experienced and have seen countless people. You are born with a pair of big eyes. To tell you the truth, I am a person with a very high status. Because my teacher is very great, so of course I am also very great." The old man said unhappily, "Nonsense. Your teacher, of course. Even if he is great, what does it have to do with you being great?" Ning-Ke ignored him and continued, "Now, even compared with the tycoon I want to kill, our status can be said to be similar." The old man sneered. "Then why are you still worried? If you want to kill him, just find a chance to do so." Ning-Ke was silent for a long time, with a helpless expression on his face. He sighed and said, "The problem is that my status comes from my teacher, and my teacher seems to be very willing to be unreasonable like us students. But in fact, he is very stubborn and very reasonable. He always says that the law of the Tang Empire is the first. Don't you think this statement is very unreasonable? If the law of the Tang Empire is the first, how can it be unreasonable?" Hearing this, the old man's face suddenly became ugly. He scolded unhappily, "Of course it is reasonable. What does being unreasonable have to do with the law of the Tang Empire? Can't I kill people without using crooked ways?" Ning-Ke did not notice the old man's expression. He staggered over and took the initiative to pick up a new pot of wine. He patted the seal and poured the wine into his mouth. He said, "If the law of the Tang Empire is the first, then I have to find evidence for a lawsuit. The problem is, where can I find evidence? If I don't use crooked ways, how can I kill people? Do I have to walk up to that person and say that I want to kill him, and then be beaten into a meat paste?" The night wind blew gently. The old man sat up straight and stared at Ning-Ke. He could not suppress his inner anger because of this guy's stupidity and confusion. His slender hands clenched the back of the chair. It seemed that if nothing happened, he would directly slap Ning-Ke's head. Ning-Ke was so drunk that he could not notice these details. He poured the wine into his stomach and expressed his lament about life. Those lament about revenge, reluctance, and the moon became more and more repetitive and boring. They always revolved around some key words. Fortunately, he still subconsciously sealed most of his heart when he was drunk and did not say Xia Ho's name and who he was. Old man, I knocked on the building of pines and cranes with a silver note. How did you come here? You have never seen the moon, have you? Poor old man. So you are really rich. How do you earn your money? I earn it from the gambling house in the western city. Do you have any business with them? Don't be fooled by my ugly cotton-padded jacket. It is said that the style was designed by my dead teacher. Oh, you look so funny when you blow your beard. Ning Ke kept muttering and pointing at the old man in the chair and laughed. There was a muffled sound. The laughter stopped abruptly. Ning Ke covered his forehead and looked at the old man in front of him in shock and confusion. The old man held a very thick short stick in his hand and looked at him angrily. You are so full of nonsense. My scalp is swollen. How could you want to kill Xia Ho with such a look? Ning Ke did not hear the last sentence clearly. His eyes rolled up and he fainted. Just as his body leaned backward and was about to fall heavily on the balcony, a gust of wind blew. The old coat fluttered slightly and the straw shoes made no sound. Eldest brother of the academy appeared on the balcony and held Ning Ke, who was about to fall. He reached out his right hand and grabbed the jar of wine that was falling quickly. Holding the unconscious Ning Ke, eldest brother looked at the old man and asked blankly, Teacher, what happened to younger brother? The old man secretly put the short stick back into his sleeve and coughed awkwardly. He said, Nothing. He offended my dignity, so I punished him with the academy rules. When the eldest brother saw the short wooden stick, he was so shocked that he almost fainted. He thought that his teacher had used this stick in his hand to banish the Taoist and Indigo to the South Sea. Tonight, he had used this thing to hit the youngest brother. Even if the youngest brother was not beaten to death, he would probably become an idiot after being saved. Thinking of this, eldest senior brother's face turned pale. The old man looked at his pale face and did not expect that he was worried about Ning Ke's safety. He frowned slightly and said, I told you to slow down 10 years ago. Why are you still so fast? Eldest brother came to the balcony of the building of pines and cranes with the wind because he sensed something wrong with Ningquebec. He did not care about his own loss. He looked at the old man and said worriedly, Teacher, will younger brother be okay? The old man looked at the unconscious Ning Ke and said, This boy has learned the skills of your youngest uncle. His muscles and bones are unbelievably strong. He was just hit by a stick. How could he die so easily? Perhaps the old man felt that his words were not convincing. He coughed twice and explained very seriously, He has used too much energy today. It's good for him to sleep for a while. Eldest brother of the academy only had one teacher. That old man was naturally the legendary headmaster of the academy. The words of the headmaster of the academy were even more powerful than the imperial edict in the Tang Empire. For eldest brother who loved his teacher all his life, everything the headmaster of the academy said was the truth. If the headmaster of the academy said that the night was white, then it must be white. If the headmaster of the academy said that Haotian was black, then Haotian must be black. If the headmaster of the academy said that Ning Ke was fine, then Ning Ke would be fine no matter whether he was fine or not. On the streets of Chang, and late at night, the headmaster of the academy walked slowly on the scattered dead leaves with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked very elegant. Eldest brother carried Ning Ke on his back and walked behind him with difficulty. You are right. There will always be a special one among thousands of lights. The headmaster of the academy looked at the faint lights in the alley and the patrolling soldiers of the Yulin Royal Guards in the distance. He said, Although your younger brother is not untainted by mud, nor is he a good person, there is still some affection in his seemingly cold-blooded and heartless body. It's just that the affection is hidden a little deeper. Chapter 1, next chapter before 10 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 369. The people in the city of Wei are still able to receive money and know how to take care of Sang Sang. I'm sure he will continue to respect you and little Mo in the future, and have a sense of belonging to the academy. The headmaster turned around and looked at Ning Ke, who was in a coma. He smiled and said, "Of course, these are all unimportant things. But I think they might affect the child's future choices." Eldest brother frowned slightly when he heard Sang Sang's name. But he did not comment on it. Instead, he suddenly said, "I always remember this sentence in Love Lotus, which you wrote many years ago." The headmaster stopped and turned around to look at his favorite eldest disciple. He said slowly, "That article was originally written about you." Eldest brother lowered his head and said, "I don't deserve it." The headmaster said, "There is no perfect person in the world. But in terms of morality and temperament, you are better than me, better than your youngest uncle, and better than anyone I've met in these years. But you did not do well in the matter a few days ago. You are not as good as Jun Mo." Eldest brother listened to his teacher's criticism in silence. Then he said, "I'm afraid that the people of the Buddhism sect have seen something wrong with the big black umbrella on youngest brother's back. We have to be careful." The headmaster looked at him quietly and suddenly flicked his sleeve. The withered leaves on the street flew into the silent night sky, as if they were leaving some clues behind the stars. "We haven't even found him in the underworld, let alone Yama. We haven't even found Yama's son. I feel sorry for that little girl, let alone this silly boy." The headmaster looked at Ning Ke, who was still in a coma, and smiled. Then, he calmly said, "In the past, I've said that no one has the right to make judgments on things that cannot be understood or confirmed in the world, and even more so, we cannot cut off the development of any possibility just to eliminate a certain bad possibility, because living is the collection of countless possibilities." Eldest brother thought of the argument with his younger brother at the back of the mountain of the academy that night. He suddenly realized that he had forgotten what his teacher had taught him. Perhaps it was because he was too tired to carry Ning Ke on his back, or because he was too shocked. He suddenly sweated profusely and soaked his old coat. "Teacher, I was wrong." The headmaster of the academy smiled and turned to walk forward. Eldest brother carried Ning Ke on his back and followed behind him. It was a late night at the end of winter. In an alley of Chang'an, a teacher walked calmly with his two most beloved students. No one knew where they would end up. Late at night in Chang'an City, more than 9,000 lights had been put out. Other than the lights on the walls of the imperial palace, only the bustling gambling houses and brothels in the western city were still lit. There were many ministers and wealthy businessmen living in the southern city, so it was heavily guarded. It was already dark, but there was still a mansion with lights on tonight. In the mansion of the Grand Secretary of the Imperial Library, Mrs. Xing sat on a round stool in the study, wiping away her tears. Her well-maintained face was full of sorrow and pity. Xing Jing, the Grand Secretary, looked at her and sighed, saying, "Your daughter has been brought back. Why are you still so sad? She is still a little unfamiliar now, but in a few days, she will be able to call you mother. Don't be too anxious." Mrs. Xing looked up at him and said sadly, "How can I not understand this? Do I have to force my daughter to do this today? I just feel that she has suffered too much over the years. As a mother, I always feel sad and guilty. I can't help but cry when I see her like this." Xing Jing, the Grand Secretary, asked in surprise, "How is she?" The little building in Jingmen Garden that she lived in originally had 4 big and 4 small maids. But when I went there earlier, I found that the 8 maids had all been driven out by my daughter. When I went into the building and asked, "Do you know what my daughter said?" She said that she was only used to serving others and not being served. As Mrs. Xing spoke, her tears fell again. She looked at the Grand Secretary and said, "How do you think I, as a mother, feel when I hear this? And don't hide it from me. I know why you hesitated yesterday. You are worried that the Empress wants to win over the Academy, so you don't want your daughter to completely break off the relationship with her damned main family. Xingjing thought about the observation of the steward and had a better impression of Sang Sang. Although his daughter, whom he had not seen for many years, was not very talkative and seemed a little unlikable, she was actually calm, pleasant, and well-educated. He nodded and stroked his beard, thinking about the Empress's words. After a moment of silence he said, "After all, she is our daughter. No matter what the Empress wants, she will not leave us. Don't worry." At this moment, there was a sudden clatter of hooves on the street outside the Grand Secretary's mansion. The Academy was far away from the gate, but it was a quiet night, so the clatter was so clear and even soul-stirring. Xingjing frowned slightly, stood up, and looked out of the study. With the rapid footsteps, the steward of the Grand Secretary's mansion respectfully led a eunuch into the study. Xingjing looked at the eunuch's face, and his frown deepened. He waved his hand to dismiss all the servants, poured a cup of tea, and handed it to the eunuch. He opened his mouth but did not say anything. It was quiet in the study. Xingjing thought the Empress was inquiring about his daughter's return from the old brush pen shop, so he thought of many excuses in his mind. However, before he could speak, the eunuch smiled and said, "Your Excellency Xing, this is the Emperor's decree." Xingjing was enlightened at first. No wonder it was Eunuch Lin who came. Then he was confused. In the past years of Tianqi era, the Tang Empire had been prosperous, and the people were peaceful. It was rare to see such an urgent decree in the middle of the night. Even if something happened at the border, the emperor would not send a eunuch to summon a civil official to the palace. Moreover, the eunuch was sent by the emperor, the head eunuch with the highest rank. Eunuch Lin did not give Xingjing more time to think and said softly, "His Majesty is very happy to know about the reunion of the Grand Secretary and his daughter. He will probably send the relevant decree tomorrow, so he came to congratulate you tonight." There was no need to come late at night to congratulate him. Xingjing knew there must be more to the decree. As expected, Eunuch Lin continued, "But Sang Sang is still Ning Kei's handmaiden according to the household register. To prevent people from gossiping, His Majesty asked the Grand Secretary to send her back to the old brush pen shop tonight." Xingjing looked angry. He thought that His Majesty's order was completely unreasonable. There was no reason to separate his own flesh and blood. He said in a deep voice, "I want to go to the palace to see His Majesty." Eunuch Lin seemed to have guessed that he would have such a reaction. He walked 2 steps forward and whispered in his ear, "This is the order of the headmaster of the academy." Xingjing was shocked and asked in disbelief, "The headmaster has returned to the capital?" Eunuch Lin sighed and said, "That's right. The headmaster of the academy hasn't spoken to the palace for many years. You should know the weight of his rare words. Even if he asks His Majesty to tear down the Daming Palace, I'm afraid His Majesty will really tear down the Daming Palace. His Majesty has regarded himself as a student of the headmaster of the academy and has never disobeyed him." Xingjing hesitated. Mrs. Xing suddenly said in a trembling voice, "I have lost her for more than 10 years. If my daughter doesn't want to leave, no one can take her away from me." Mrs. Xing was not from a powerful family, nor did she have any relationship with the big families in Qinghe County. Before marrying Xingjing as a concubine, she was just an ordinary girl. In the Tang Empire, it was these ordinary people who had the simplest and most resolute feelings and views of right and wrong. In front of such simple and resolute feelings and views of right and wrong, power and strength often lost their original magic. Whether it was the headmaster of the academy or the emperor, they might have to temporarily avoid it. Eunuch Lin was slightly stunned. He secretly respected the Grand Secretary's wife and said softly, "Madam, you have misunderstood. Of course, we have to listen to Miss Sang Sang first. His Majesty's decree is only for you not to stop her. I was wondering if you could let Miss Sang Sang come out and listen to me?" Xingjing and his wife looked at each other and thought that since His Majesty had said so, it was indeed not good for them to be too tough. So they sent someone to Jingmin Garden to see if Sangsang was asleep. Sangsang naturally did not sleep well when she was not in the old brush pen shop. Last night, she kept her eyes open and looked at the complicated and beautiful patterns on the curtains. Tonight, she sat by the window in a daze. She came to the study. Eunuch Lin only said one sentence, "Ning Ke is seriously injured." Sangsang was silent for a moment and then turned to walk out of the study, as if she did not hear anything. After a moment, she came back with her luggage. She bowed to the Grand Secretary and his wife, and said in a low voice, "I will go and have a look. I will be back tomorrow." Then she thought for a moment and added, "I will be back when he is better." The bamboo forest in the reception yard was blown by the night wind, like a dark blue sea, like the dense water grass in the ink lake in late autumn. The disciples of the Black Ink Garden did not know what Senior Brother Ning Ke and the Hill Master had said during the day, nor did they know what had happened. They were all sound asleep in their own rooms. Emo Shanshan did not sleep. She looked at the sections of calligraphy in front of her in the candlelight. They were all written by Ning Ke during the day. The ink was dry but still fresh, as if they still had the smell of that day. Zhuo Zhihua came in wearing an unlined garment. She looked at her face and said worriedly, "What on earth happened? Why did you have to leave Chang'an in advance?" Emo Shanshan looked at the sections of calligraphy in the candlelight and smiled. Her red lips were tightly pressed together, like the red line on the willow tree. In the Great River Kingdom, the red line on the willow tree represented marriage. "I heard that Ning Ke was injured before he came today." Emo Shanshan frowned slightly and asked briefly, "Who?" "Daosher monk from the Yueluan Kingdom. He challenged Ning Ke on the street in the morning and was beheaded." Zhuo Zhihua hesitated for a moment and said, "I heard that Daosher monk had been studying scriptures and worshipping Buddha in the Xiankong Temple for many years. His state is very high, so I think Ning Ke must have been seriously injured." Emo Shanshan stood up and sat down slowly after a moment of silence. "So you were injured when you were writing. But why didn't you tell me?" The candle wick, which had not been cut for a long time, was slightly curled. The light was dim and reflected on the girl's white dress with a pale yellow color. But when it reflected on her face, it still could not hide the slight paleness. "Try to finish the second chapter and the third chapter before midnight. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 370. Ning Ke woke up, but before he could open his eyes, he gasped. There was a sharp pain in his head, which made him a little confused. He could not remember the last scene in the building of Pines and Cranes last night. He was not sure whether the headache was caused by the hangover or something else. He thought for a long time and finally remembered the tall old man in fox fur and the thick short stick in the old man's hand. He also understood the cause of his headache. He could not help feeling angry and ashamed. He was angry that the old man dared to hurt him, and ashamed that as a core disciple of the headmaster of academy, he was beaten by an old rich man in Chang and with a stick. Was he still lying on the balcony of the building of Pines and Cranes? Ning Ke thought about these questions and touched his body subconsciously. From the hardness of the brick bed and the smell of the bedding, he knew that he was lying in the old brush pen shop. Then who sent him back? Was it the shopkeeper of the building of Pines and Cranes or that hateful old man? The familiar smell of the bedding lingered in his nose. It was not a peculiar smell, but a smell that made him feel at ease. It was the smell of him and her. However, he smelled another smell that he was not familiar with but was very clear in his memory. The smell of beef and egg porridge made him feel lost for a moment, as if he had returned to the past. Many years ago, he took Sangsang to the city of Wei to join the army. On the way, they passed by the town of Tusher and met a grassland barbarian chef who was selling beef porridge in the town. An old man in the town was very particular about breaking an egg into the beef congee. When the fresh beef came into contact with the egg that had just fallen to the grass in the morning, it immediately became an extremely fragrant, sweet, tender, and smooth delicacy. Even from afar, one could feel that it was extremely delicious. Sang Sang was very hungry for the bowl of beef and egg porridge, but Ning Kai did not buy it to save money. The two passed through the town in silence. Later, in the city of Wei, he followed the army to kill the horse gang for the first time. After getting the first money, Sang Sang made beef and egg porridge for 4 days in a row. Both of them felt a little sick. Then they realized that although beef and egg porridge was very nourishing, it actually tasted ordinary. So they never made it again. Ning Kai opened his eyes and looked at the white paper pasted on the roof. He smelled the aroma of beef and egg porridge coming in through the crack of the door. He rubbed his aching head and sat up. He pulled his outer coat from the foot of the Kong and put it on. Pushing open the door, he went to the courtyard. He saw that the neatly stacked firewood under the courtyard wall was a bit less, as if it had been stolen by rats in the night. There was a hole in the top row. He looked at the front of the shop and saw that the vegetables, rice, and roast duck that were left on the table the day before were gone. The table had been wiped clean and the floor had been mopped. There was no dust at all. A hot mist floated out of the kitchen. Ning Kai walked over and found that the leftover vegetables had been poured into the swill basin. The stove, which had been cold for 2 days, was warm again. A few small firewood were quietly burning inside. The porridge bowl on the stove was bubbling, constantly emitting steam and fragrance. There was a small stool in front of the stove. Sang Sang sat at the place she was most used to sitting. She looked at the firewood, listened to the sound of porridge, and controlled the heat. Her head was slightly drooping, as if she was a little tired. Her dark face was reflected by the firewood, and the yellowish hair floating in front of her forehead was curled even more by the heat. Ning Kai looked at her thin back. After a moment of silence, he walked up to her and patted her on the shoulder. Sang Sang woke up and looked up at him. She asked, "You're awake?" Ning Kai said, "It seems that you didn't sleep much last night?" Sang Sang said, "Yes." Ning Kai said, "Then you go to sleep first. I'll make porridge." Sang Sang stood up from the small stool in front of the stove and wiped the slightly curled hair on her forehead to the back. When she walked to the door of the kitchen, she suddenly remembered something. She turned back and reminded him, "Watch the fire. Don't make it too big." Ning Kai said, "I know." Sang Sang said again, "You can't drink. Drink less in the future." Ning Kai said, "I know." Then he walked to the stove and sat on the small stool. He took out the most burning firewood from the hole of the stove and turned the windshield to make the firewood smaller. Sang Sang woke up at noon. She took out a towel and a toothbrush to wash up. She went into the kitchen to take a look at the porridge bowl and then walked to the front bed. There was a beautiful plate of peeled roast duck on the table in front of her. There were also 2 plates of vegetables with fresh spring onions and garlic. There was also a bowl of beef and egg porridge that was slightly burnt and appetizing. There were also 2 pairs of chopsticks and 2 empty bowls. Except for the beef and egg porridge cooked by Sang Sang, the other dishes were exactly the same as the day before yesterday. Ning Kai actually went to the market to buy vegetables and recooked the dishes while she was sleeping. Sang Sang looked at the dishes on the table and suddenly looked down at the small shoes outside her skirt. She whispered, "Have you recovered? If you have, I'll go back to the scholar's mansion." Ning Kai said, "You don't have to go back." Sang Sang was startled. After thinking for a while, she walked to the table and picked up a bowl of porridge for him. She placed it in front of him and handed the chopsticks to him. Then she began to serve herself porridge. "Eat." Ning Kai picked up a duck leg and put it in her bowl. Sang Sang said seriously, "This is a dish, not rice." Ning Kai said, "It's all the same." Then they began to eat quietly in the shop. Occasionally, he would pick up some vegetables for her. Occasionally, she would dip the duck skin in the sauce and put it into his bowl. Then, she would serve him a second bowl of porridge. Ning Ke suddenly laughed. Sang Sang laughed too. A horse carriage stopped at the entrance of Lin 47th Street. Mo Shanshan sat by the window and lifted the curtain to look at the old brush pen shop not far away. The old brush pen shop was not closed. She could clearly see the scene in the shop and many details. Her eyes were still calm, but her eyelashes were slightly trembling. She had read the chicken soup calligraphy, and it was because of the rubbing of the note that she gradually imagined the man who wrote this note. So much so that she had developed feelings for him even before they met. And it was also because of this chicken soup calligraphy that she had been very familiar with the name at the top of the calligraphy since last summer. She even knew the importance of that name to Ning Ke earlier than himself. That was why she had been silent and thinking many times in the wilderness. That was why she had to see Sang Sang. She saw Sang Sang on the first day she entered Chang'an. To her surprise, she was just an ordinary handmaiden. Then she saw Sang Sang again today. And this time, she saw Sang Sang alone with Ning Quebec looking at Ning Ke and Sang Sang eating at the opposite table in the old brush pen shop. Mo Shanshan finally believed that these two people had been in a separate world many years ago. For them, everyone else in the world was outside the world, and everything was outside the world. It was difficult to leave their own shadows in that world. Just like eyes and eyelashes, the only difference was that the eyes could not see the eyelashes, and the eyelashes could not hurt the eyes. But when a strong wind blew from the outside, the two would notice each other's existence. But I am a mountain, not the wind. Mo Shanshan slowly put down the curtain, took out a letter and handed it to Zhuozhihua beside her. Zhuozhihua hesitated and said, "Are we really leaving Chang'an like this?" Mo Shanshan calmly said, "After all, Mr. First invited me here. Later, we will go to the academy in the southern suburbs. After seeing Mr. First, we will leave." Zhuozhihua sighed and no longer tried to persuade her. She took the letter and got off the carriage. After the meal, Sang Sang went to wash the dishes. Ning Ke sat at the table and opened the letter. The letter was written in Mo Shanshan's familiar handwriting. The young girl's handwriting was not elegant or delicate, but there was a sense of openness and determination that could not be hidden under her tranquil appearance. The last few paragraphs of the letter were like this. Maybe fate arranged for you to be in a separate world many years ago. There was no need for someone to stand outside the wooden door and knock, nor for someone to shout and disturb you under the winter tree outside the courtyard. But I don't believe in fate. I have benefited a lot from the journey in the wilderness. I am very happy to travel side by side in Chang'an in winter. In the snowy night and the red wall, you once said that you liked me. I once said that liking was not enough, and it turned out that it was indeed not enough. But at least you once said that you liked me, and I like it very much. Chang'an is far from the great river kingdom, but it is not as far as the wilderness. If you really want to come, if you really want to go, it is very close. In the future you will come to see me, or I will come to see you, or we will meet again in the clouds. It is all a happy thing in life. After so many things, the rivers and mountains in my eyes have a new meaning. When we meet again, what I write will be more magnificent than what I write today. I hope you will also work harder and not let me down. After reading the letter, Ning Ke was silent for a long time. Then he walked back to the bedroom in the backyard, lifted the bedboard, and took out the box under it. He found that the silver notes in the box had been returned. Looking at the thick silver notes in the box, he could not help but smile. He knew that even if he did not say that before dinner, Sang Sang had already prepared to move back. He put the box back under the bedboard, looked at the letter in his hand, thought for a moment, and threw it into the wastepaper basket beside the desk. Then he took the big black umbrella and told Sang Sang to wait for her in the front berth. After washing the dishes, Sang Sang began to fetch water. She had fetched water once in the morning the day before yesterday, and the water tank was basically full. Soon she finished her chores and habitually wiped the non-existent beads of sweat on her forehead. She walked back to the bedroom and started to change clothes. Then she saw the letter in the wastepaper basket. She was silent for a moment, carefully wiped her wet hands on the apron, and walked to the wastepaper basket to pick up the letter. Then she took out another box from a corner of the room and solemnly placed the letter in the deepest part of the box. Then she put the box back in its original position. This was Song Song's little black box, in which there were some things that Ning Ke had decided to throw away for some reason, but were very precious to him. For example, the funeral invitation that Ning Ke had copied on the rainy night after Joaer's death. She knew that this letter was precious to Ning Ke, so she kept it. Walking out of the old brush pen shop, Sang Sang opened the big black umbrella and followed Ning Ke to the outside of Lin 47th Street. Ning Ke had long been used to her making the bed, washing the dishes, and holding the umbrella, but after a while, he suddenly took the big black umbrella from Sang Sang. Sang Sang raised her little face and looked at him with a puzzled look. He smiled and said, "Let's go." Sang Sang squinted her willowy eyes and nodded with a smile, "Yes." The first spring rain fell in Chang'an City, and it was as precious as oil. Under the umbrella, the master and the handmaiden looked at the curtain of rain, as if seeing the past and the future. The third chapter. There are still a few minutes before the end of today. Please vote for me if you have recommendation tickets. I will write the fourth chapter, but I don't know when it will be finished. Those who can't stay up late can go to bed first. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 371. In the first spring rain in the 15th year of Tianqi era, Ning Ke took Sang Sang to many places in Chang'an. Of course, the first place they went to was the Grand Secretary's mansion. After all, the Grand Secretary and his wife were Song Song's biological parents, and judging from what happened in the past few days, they really loved Sang Sang. Standing in the quiet study, Ning Ke felt a little nervous out of nowhere. It was totally different from the fierce and powerful look he had the day before yesterday. It was probably because he knew very well that in the future, even if he did not need the consent of the couple, he was born to be several heads lower than them in the eyes of the world. Grand Secretary Xing Jing and his wife knew Ning Ke's identity and naturally did not treat him as an ordinary person. They also knew that the relationship between their daughter and Ning Ke was not as simple as that of a master and a servant. Therefore, they treated Ning Ke with respect, vigilance, uneasiness, and scrutiny. Regarding Song Song's removal from the register, the people in the study tacitly did not mention it. Ning Ke did not want Sang Sang to be separated from him. Xing Jing, the Grand Secretary, was thinking about the Empress's hope. Xing Jing, on the other hand, was too busy holding Song Song's hand to care about how long she would stay in the old brush pen shop and the Grand Secretary's mansion. She did not notice it at all, and Sang Sang was too lazy to think about it. In the end, the two parties had a friendly talk and determined some basic principles for future communication. Ning Ke promised not to interfere with the family reunion of the Grand Scholar's mansion, and the Grand Scholar's mansion also vaguely admitted that Ning Ke had the priority and some derivative rights in some aspects. Then they parted happily. Then they went to the Princess Mansion. Liu looked at the master and servant under the big black umbrella and sighed softly in her heart. She looked at Ning Ke and said calmly, "You should know very well why Her Majesty values this matter." Ning Ke had been busy looking for people to scold the monk in the lake for the past 2 days. He had not thought that this matter could be related to the palace. However, this matter was not complicated. He thought for a moment and understood the reason. After thinking for a while, he said, "I don't think I'm qualified to represent the Academy's attitude. And I think neither the headmaster nor eldest brother is interested in expressing their attitude on this matter." Liu said, The problem is that, if the royal family is unable to determine the direction of this matter, and the Tang Empire wants to be stable and everlasting, we need the Academy to show its attitude. Ning Ke said, I believe the civil and military officials will have their own preferences. What if the civil and military officials are divided into two factions and can't come to an agreement? Liu looked into his eyes and did not give him any chance to dodge. She said, although the Academy is not involved in politics, the attitude of the Academy is very important to the civil officials. Although the military is relatively distant from the Academy, once the Academy expresses its stance, I believe that no general will dare to oppose it. Ning Ke furrowed his brows and remained silent. Why do the disciples of the second floor of the Academy need to enter the human realm? Because the Academy exists in the Tang Empire, and the Academy itself needs the Tang Empire to be at peace for a long time. Since you are a person who has entered the human realm, you have to bear this responsibility. Ning Ke sighed, it seems a little heavy. Liu said, Master Yen Sei has entrusted the safety of the entire Chang'an city to you. The burden on your shoulders is already very heavy. So what if you add these to it? Don't worry when you have too many debts, and don't itch when you have too many lice. Is this the logic? Ning Ke sighed and said, when we return to Chang'an together, Your Highness, you should be very clear that I am just a very insignificant person. Now, in less than 2 years, I have to bear so many responsibilities. I really am not mentally prepared. And to be honest, I don't think I have this ability. Liu said, who asked you to become the disciple of the headmaster of the Academy and Master Yen Sei? Your experience in Chang'an during the 2 years you have been in Chang'an does not seem to be very steep. You have climbed up with your own perseverance. However, if you look back from the results, I am afraid that there has not been a person as lucky as you in the Tang Empire in the past 500 years. I am not able to bear the safety of Chang'an city yet. As for the continuation of the Tang Empire, there will be others to worry about. Your Highness's words just now really disturbed me. Ning Ke suddenly understood something and felt a lot more relaxed. He said, if there is really a problem or situation that I cannot solve, I can ask the headmaster and senior brothers and sisters. I believe that they must be much more intelligent than me. At that time, I will at most be the guy who enters the palace to convey the Academy's opinion. After a moment of silence, Liu looked at him and said with a smile, I hope that when you enter the palace you will see me. Ning Ke said, I only hope that when you see me in the palace, you will not be disappointed. The first spring rain came and went quietly. After a while, it disappeared without a trace and turned into a soft dampness on the black eaves and white walls of Chang'an city. It did not make the streets colder, but only washed the face of the winter trees that had not yet sprouted and moistened their bodies. Sang Sang took the big black umbrella that Ning Ke handed over and tied it on her back. She looked up at him and said, Why are the words that you and Her Highness always so difficult to understand? They are all very simple words. Ning Ke thought of the young forces that Liu had been cultivating in the court and the military all these years and said, It is just that the person who speaks is more complicated. Sang Sang said, You did not say that she is an idiot today. Ning Ke replied, Although I still think that what she did was a bit idiotic, she is after all your friend and has a good relationship with me. It is good to be kind to her. They then went to the House of Red Sleeves, went to the gambling house in the western city, and even walked around the imperial city. They met Mistress Jian, Mr. Qi, Su Chongshan and others. Ning Ke did not stay in these places for too long and did not say anything. He just appeared in front of them with Sang Sang, which was enough to express his meaning clearly. Sang Sang has returned. You don't have to worry about her safety, and don't have to worry about Ning Ke's murderous aura that was about to tear the entire Chang'an city apart. When they left the imperial palace and passed by the southern gate temple, Ning Ke suddenly thought of what Mingqi had said. He looked at Sang Sang and asked, Although I hate that old man, You are after all his only successor. I heard that the West Hill Divine Palace has always wanted to take you back, which means that you may become the great divine priest of light in the future. What do you think of this? Sangsang said, Teacher did not ask me to go to the West Hill. Ning Ke smiled and said, I don't mean to ask you to go to the West Hill either. I just occasionally think that my Sangsang can actually become the great divine priest of light, and I find it very interesting. A great divine priest of light serving you tea, making your bed, and even warming your bed is indeed something to be proud of. But if billions of Haotian Taoism believers in the world know your evil thoughts, do you believe that even if you enter the back of the mountain of the academy, you will be drowned by their spittle? Chun Pippi appeared in front of them and looked at Ning Ke mockingly. Ning Ke looked at him and asked, Why can you always find me so easily? Chun Pippi said, Because you have a strong smell of shamelessness. Ning Ke did not want to argue with him and asked, What do you want from me today? He suddenly remembered that Chun Pippi mentioned by the lake at the foot of Yanming Mountain that the academy held a big meeting, but everyone quarreled without any result. Seventh sister said that she wanted to take him back for interrogation. He could not help but ask vigilantly, Senior brothers and senior sisters, why did they quarrel like this? Must I go back to participate? Are you trying to trick me to go back and make me their punching bag instead of you? Chun Pippi glanced at Sangsang beside him and said, That matter has been solved. Ning Ke asked in surprise, How? Chun Pippi said, Because someone solved it himself, so senior brothers and senior sisters also solved it. Sangsang gently pulled Ning Ke's sleeve and reminded him, He seems to be talking about you. Ning Ke nodded and said, I can also hear that there is something strange about this matter. Then he looked at Chun Pippi and asked, Since the matter has been solved, why did you come to me again? Chun Pippi answered, To ask you to return to the academy. Ning Ke asked, What happened? Chun Pippi said, Because the headmaster is back. Ning Ke did not speak for a long time under the lonely wondersuite that poked out of the wall of the southern gate temple. Ever since he entered the academy, he had been looking forward to the day he could meet his teacher, the legendary headmaster of the academy. However, the headmaster of the academy was always traveling outside and did not appear even when eldest brother appeared. Until now, someone suddenly ran over and said that the headmaster of the academy had returned to Chang'an. This was too sudden. Ning Ke did not know what kind of person the headmaster of the academy was. In fact, he had not heard of any other legendary deeds of the headmaster of the academy other than the disappearance of the Peach Mountain of West Hill. However, he was very clear that a person who could be youngest uncle's senior brother and a person who could teach people like eldest brother and second brother must be an extremely legendary person. And such a person was his own teacher. Every time he thought of this, he would feel proud and proud. Today, he was finally going to meet his teacher. He was so nervous and anxious that he wanted to escape subconsciously. I haven't brushed. I brushed my teeth, but I'm still not ready. Look at my winter clothes. I haven't washed them for a few days. There are still porridge stains on them. Ning Ke pointed at the beef and egg porridge stains on his chest and explained very seriously and nervously, I think I should go back to take a bath and cleanse myself and then change into new clothes before returning to the academy. Take a bath and cleanse yourself? Chun Pippi looked at him and said very seriously, If the headmaster knows that you have done these things, he will definitely ask second brother to make you into a meat pie. Because the headmaster thinks that only the deceased can enjoy such treatment, which is equivalent to saying that you regard him as a dead person. Ning Ke did not know that he had already scolded the headmaster of the academy for being an old man on the balcony of the building of pines and cranes. Therefore, when he heard Chun Pippi's threat, he immediately turned evil and said that he would immediately go back to the academy with him. He looked at Sangsang and was ready to let her go back to the old brush pen shop first. Let's go together. Chun Pippi glanced at Sangsang and said, The headmaster is probably very curious about the little handmaiden of the candidate for the divine priest of light, so he specially asked you to bring her along. Ning Ke nodded. Except for him, Sang Sang had an indifferent attitude towards everything in the world. Since he agreed to let her go, then she would go with them. However, the three of them were forced to stop before they could walk out of Chang'an City. Because the Vermilion Bird Street in front of the south gate of Chang'an City was crowded with people. They did not know what kind of bustle could attract so many people after the rain. Churn Pippi stood on tiptoe and looked into the crowd. He saw a long bench in the empty space in the middle of the crowd. A white dog was lying under the bench. A little girl was lying on the bench. The little girl was wearing a shabby leather coat. There was a heavy strip-shaped stone on the coat. Today is over. It will be a new day soon. Continue to work hard. Then the recommendation votes have been obtained. Please vote for more. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 372. The little girl's shabby leather coat was a little thin. It seemed that it would break along with her small body at any time. The people who saw this scene could not help but feel a little frightened. A man in ragged clothes stood beside the bench. His expression was dull, but his eyes were full of fear. He held the iron hammer high in his hands, but could not smash it down no matter how hard he tried. Some of the Chang'an people who were watching turned away and did not dare to look. Some tried to dissuade him, some were too nervous to speak, and some were so excited that they could not take their eyes off her. The white dog under the leg of the bench was bored and lying on its front leg. Smashing a big stone on the chest? Churn Pippi looked at the scene in the crowd and said incredulously. Ning Ke was also a little surprised. It was said that smashing a big stone on the chest was rarely seen in Chang'an City because it was too cliché. However, it was extremely rare that it was a little girl who smashed a big stone on the chest. Churn Pippi said worriedly, "Such a big stone is going to crush the little girl to death, let alone the hammer. This can't do. We have to stop it. It's too dangerous." After saying this, he squeezed into the crowd, wanting to stop this from happening. However, before he could go over, the little girl on the bench seemed to glare at the man next to her. The man seemed to be greatly frightened. His hands went limp, and the iron hammer fell to the ground. There was a muffled sound. The heavy stone on the little girl broke into countless pieces and fell from the side of the bench. One of the stones hit the white dog by the leg of the bench. The white dog shook its head. The streets of the South City Gate were completely silent. People looked at the motionless little girl on the bench and wondered if she had been crushed to death. Some people's faces showed that they could not bear it. At this moment, the little girl nimbly turned over from the bench and brushed off the dust on her body. She looked at the man beside her and said angrily, "That day in the ruined temple, I picked you because of your strength. But how can you have any effect if you don't dare to use your strength? Don't do this next time." Only then did the surrounding crowd come to their senses. Looking at the little girl with a childish face and her nonchalant appearance, they realized that she was completely fine. They couldn't help but cheer and applaud excitedly. For a moment, the sound of cheers and whistles resounded through the long street. The little girl took off the leather hat on her head and walked towards the crowd of onlookers. Her long black braid, which was previously stuffed in the hat, hung down to her knees and swayed non-stop. The little girl's smile was childish and cute, and her words were neat and clean. The people of Chang'an City had already admired her to the extreme when they saw her breaking the big stone on her chest. Now that they saw that she was cute, there was no reason for them not to pay. Soon, the leather hat in her hand was stuffed with copper coins. The little girl held a hat full of heavy copper coins and smiled even more happily. There were also some kind-hearted people of Chang'an City who scolded the poor man, saying that no matter how poor he was, he should not let his young sister do such a dangerous thing. They also said that if they saw him breaking the big stone on the little girl's chest again in Chang and City, they would definitely ask the Chang and local government to arrest him and bring him back for punishment. The little girl found the stone pebble from a hole in the front of her fur coat and threw it away. She walked to the side of the man and patted her little chest. She smiled and explained to the crowd, "Thank you for your concern, but I'm really fine. I've trained to urinate." The action of patting her chest was extremely heroic, but she was still a young girl with small palms and breasts. This action naturally made her look a bit more cute, which made the crowd laugh kindly. Chun Pippi opened his mouth and stared at the little girl like a frightened idiot. He said, "This little girl is really cruel. Isn't she worried that she can't feed the child in the future if her chest is flattened?" His eyes fell on the little girl's chest, and he suddenly said, "Anyway, she doesn't have any chest." Ning Ke slightly lowered his head and glanced at Chun Pippi's chest. Chun Pippi knew that he was saying that his chest was big because he was fat, so he turned his head away in shame. Ning Ke looked at the scene and his body suddenly stiffened. The scene of breaking the big stone on the chest had surprised him, but when he saw the little girl's clear face, he was suddenly shocked, speechless. "You take Sang Sang to the academy first. I have something to do and will be there soon," he said to Chun Pippi. Chun Pippi looked at him with some confusion and reminded him, "Don't go to the incense bath and change clothes." Ning Ke smiled bitterly and said, "I won't." Chun Pippi said in a serious tone, "You will see the teacher eventually. Don't think about slipping away." Ning Ke sighed and said, "I understand the logic of an ugly daughter-in-law meeting her parents-in-law." In a quiet alley on the side of Vermilion Bird Avenue, Ning Ke looked down at Tang Xiaotang in front of him and said with emotion, "I am wondering if you are crazy. Why are you in Chang and City?" The little girl who broke the big stone on the chest at the south gate was naturally Tang Xiaotang. Other than this girl from the Devil's Doctrine, which girl in the world could have such an inhuman body strength? Tang Xiaotang looked up at him and said, "My brother asked me to come to Chang'an." Ning Ke was startled and said, "Then your brother is crazy." Tang Xiaotang said unhappily, "You are crazy. I told you in the Hulun Sea that I would come to Chang'an City to play with you. Why are you like this as soon as we meet?" Ning Ke could not understand the thinking and logic of this brother and sister from the Devil's Doctrine. He gasped and said, "Come to Chang'an City to play? Don't you know that this is the Central Plains, this is the Tang Empire, this is Chang'an City, and Tang Xiaotang is the legendary remnant of the Devil's Doctrine?" Tang Xiaotang looked at him in confusion and asked, "So what?" "What?" Ning Ke looked at the entrance of the alley vigilantly and angrily circled around the tree in the alley. He bent down and stared into her eyes. He said, "A remnant of the Devil's Doctrine appearing in Chang'an City is like a little white rabbit running to the side of a big black bear that is taking a dump. It is like a moth flying into a raging fire." Tang Xiaotang smiled and comforted him. "So you are worried about this. Don't be afraid. The disciples of the Enlightenment Doctrine do not have any aura fluctuations. The cultivators here can't even tell who we are. So many seniors of the Enlightenment Doctrine were hiding in the Central Plains, and nothing happened." Ning Ke looked at the little girl's childish face and did not know what to say. He forcibly suppressed his anger and explained seriously, "It is not like it was in the past. Indeed, no one would think that a remnant of the Devil's Doctrine would dare to appear in broad daylight. But what did you do just now? You actually broke the big stone on the chest. When you become famous in Chang'an City, do you think the Imperial Center Administration will not be able to find out where you came from?" He continued, "Even if the guys in black from the Judicial Department of the Divine Hall can't enter Chang'an City to catch you, do you think no one will do anything to you? The people of Chang'an City who pitied you and admired you before can applaud you now. But if they know that you are from the Devil's Doctrine, they will definitely swallow you alive. Don't forget that we Tangs also believe in Haotian." Tang Xiaotang innocently spread her hands and looked very cute. she said, "it is too far from the wilderness to Chang and city. I spent all my money when I reached capital Chung. I begged along the way and thought that begging in Chang and city would bring shame to the academy and you. That is why I wanted to make money by performing." Ning Ke was slightly stunned. Then he noticed that Tang Xiaotong's leather coat was even more tattered than when they met in the wilderness. The front of the small leather boots on her feet was even cracked. She must have suffered a lot during the long journey. Looking at the little girl at this moment, he could not help but think of the scene of him and Sang Sang wandering in the world many years ago. He could not bear to blame her again. Feeling a little strange, he did not notice the description of shame in Tang Xiaotong's previous words. Tang Xiaotong said with a smile, "The Tangs are really nice. There are people everywhere along the way. Some people even helped me find the government officials. When I begged, they cooked new food for me several times. No one has ever harmed me. And you are also very nice to me. You have never thought of killing me." Ning Ke had no interest in killing the devil. Moreover, he had now joined the devil. In other words, he and the little girl in front of him were the same kind. How could he have any hostility or killing intent? After thinking for a moment, he took out a few pieces of silver and stuffed them into Tang Xiaotong's hand. He said, "Go to the building of pines and cranes and book a private room to eat. Wait for me to come back." Suddenly he thought of the sinister old man who hid a wooden stick in his sleeve on the balcony of the building of pines and cranes last night. It seemed to be dangerous there, so he simply handed her a key. "There is a shop called the Old Brush Pen Shop on Lin 47th Street in the Eastern City. It is mine. Go there and wait for me to come back. I remind you not to climb over the wall. You must go through the door. And don't touch anything inside." Thinking that the headmaster of the academy was still waiting for him in the academy, Ning Ke really had no time to say anything more to Tang Xiaotong. After quickly telling her these things, he ran out of the south gate like a gust of wind. Holding the silver in one hand and the key in the other, Tang Xiaotong looked at Ning Ke's hurried back. She wanted to tell him that she had somewhere to go, but it was too late. She could only shrug her shoulders cutely. These days, the big black horse had been left to roam in the back mountain of the academy. So Ning Ke did not ride a horse or take a carriage. After walking out of the south gate of Chang'an, he walked into the deep withered grass beside the official road. He began to run with the great power he had obtained after joining the devil and his seemingly tireless body. The stubborn winter grass and the even more stubborn insects slapped his cheeks from time to time. He squinted his eyes and ran wildly. It did not take long for him to reach the side door of the academy in the southern suburbs. On the official road not far away, there was a fleet of carriages slowly heading south. Ning Ke looked there and guessed that the carriages should be the girls of the Great River Kingdom who had left Chang'an. Looking at the gradually fading carriages, he was silent for a long time. Then he turned around and walked into the academy. Then he saw a little girl standing in the deep winter grass beside the road. This little girl had just broken up with him in Chang and had quickly reunited with him. In the winter grass, Tang Xiaotong was slightly panting. She looked at him and said, "You really run fast." Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Try to finish before 11 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 373. Looking at Tang Xiaotong in the grass, Ning Ke was stunned. He sighed and asked, "Are you a ghost? Why do you follow me wherever I go? No matter how fast I run, it doesn't seem to work." Tang Xiaotong did not have time to react to his unfriendly tone. That snow-white puppy rushed out from behind her, baring its sharp teeth and growling at Ning Quebec. However, it was probably because the memory of being ravaged by Ning Ke in the wilderness was too deep. It only dared to stand in front of its master to show its wildness, and did not dare to take a step closer to Ning Quebec. "You run really fast. I almost thought you were from the Enlightenment doctrine." Tang Xiaotang said, "But no matter how fast you run, you can't be faster than me." Ning Ke asked helplessly, "My little lady, what do you want to do with me?" Tang Xiaotang said, "My brother wants me to enter the academy and be a student of the headmaster of the academy." Ning Ke was stunned for a long time before he could confirm that he did not hear wrongly. He could not help but have the urge to burn all the winter grass in front of him. He said, "You two siblings are really crazy. How can you want to be a student of the headmaster of the academy? Don't you know that my teacher is the leader of the righteous faction in the Central Plains? Well, even though he rarely appears, at least he is a spiritual leader. Even if he doesn't use violent means to subdue you, do you think he will accept you as a disciple?" Tang Xiaotang said confusedly, "My brother said that the academy has always taught everyone without discrimination." Ning Ke said, "Anyway, I advise you to give up. I can't bring you to the back of the mountain of the academy. Besides, I am now the most favored younger brother. Why should I have a younger sister like you?" After saying this, he turned around and walked along the slightly slanted stone path towards the green slope on the side of the academy. However, no matter how fast he walked, Tang Xiaotang and the little white puppy could always keep up with him. Tang Xiaotang laughed behind him and said, "If the headmaster of the academy knew that you are such a shameless guy, he might not like you and might even kick you out. Then wouldn't I be able to fill in your vacancy?" Ning Ke thought that he was willing to do anything in his life and was used to flattering others. He thought of the generals in the city of Wei, Master Yen Sei and eldest brother. How could the headmaster of the academy escape from his control? Can we meet again? I've been begging Buddha for thousands of years." At this moment, a singing voice suddenly came from below the stone path. The singer's voice was not very beautiful. It was not hoarse, but there was a strange old aura to it. Coupled with the lyrics and the fact that he was tone-deaf, he sang the melody as if he was speaking, which made it even more absurd and comical. Tang Xiaotang curiously turned her head and looked behind her. Although the melody was very strange to Ning Ke, he felt that he had heard the lyrics somewhere before. Suddenly, he came to his senses. How could anyone else know this song besides him? He looked down the stone path and saw a tall old man wearing a dark and expensive fox fur coat, carrying a lacquered food box, walking up the slope. Wasn't he the man from the building of pines and cranes last night? Looking at the old man, Ning Ke felt a sharp pain in his head. He thought of the short wooden stick that had sneakily attacked him, and a cold smile appeared on his lip. He was ready to stop the old man and beat him up. This was the principle behind the so-called revenge, returning a stick with a fist. Ning Ke knew that even if he was drunk, he still had the strength to fight. However, he was knocked out by the old man with a stick. This old man must not be an ordinary rich man in Chang'an. He was naturally vigilant. The great spirit in his body slowly circulated and his hands grasped the air as if he was holding a knife. In a moment, he was ready to fight. Suddenly, he glimpsed the little white dog hiding behind Tang Xiaotang's small leather boot. Its ears were drooping and it was whimpering in fear. He could not help but feel a little moved. He knew that the little white dog was not a dog, but a real snow wolf in the wilderness. No matter how much the white wolf feared him, it did not have the slightest intention of surrendering to him. Then why did it behave like this at this time? Could it be that the old man had made it instinctively feel fear? Ning Ke had been fighting in the grassland of Min Mountain for many years. He did not know how many thrilling situations he had encountered. His reaction speed had long been tempered to be extraordinarily fast. At this time, it was just a tiny detail, but it was like a spark falling on a pile of hay. It ignited a raging flame in his mind, and made him think of a certain possibility. This was the academy. The tall old man in fox fur was very powerful. Thinking of that possibility, Ning Ke's heart moved slightly. Then, he quickly turned cold and trembled because of the shock. At this critical moment, he perfectly displayed his control over his emotions and body. Looking at the old man walking up the stairs, he did not show any extra emotions on his face. The sneer that had just appeared on the corner of his mouth seemed to have met the sunlight, and suddenly bloomed like a flower with incomparable warmth. The great spirit in his body melted silently like snow in spring, and his hands that were holding the hilt naturally raised into fists in front of his chest. He bowed slightly and said gently, "I didn't expect to see you again, old sir." The headmaster carried the food box and walked up the slope. He looked at Ning Ke in front of him with interest, but did not speak. Ning Ke looked back at the headmaster calmly. His facial expression and body posture did not show any abnormalities. However, only he knew that in a place where the headmaster could not see, his body that was about to collapse from the pressure was fiercely fighting against his strong willpower. Dozens of beads of sweat slowly and quietly seeped out from his back, gradually wetting the back of his clothes. Because he had to use his willpower to forcibly control his body's instinctive fear and reaction, even though he looked calm and the smile in his eyes was gentle and sweet, in fact, he had already used 120% of his strength. The soles of his feet were piercing, and his calves and abdomen were in pain. He could cramp at any time. The headmaster suddenly opened his mouth and said, "I am just an ordinary old man. You do not need to be so serious." Ning Ke said indignantly, "Who dares to say that you are an ordinary old man?" The headmaster's tall body slightly leaned forward and looked down at him. When Ning Ke felt a little scared, he smiled and said, "But last night, someone said that I am a poor old man." Ning Ke felt that something was wrong, but he still wanted to put up a last-ditch struggle. He forced a smile and said, "Last night, I was talking nonsense after drinking. Someone like you would not care about a young man like me." The headmaster sighed and said, "Before I die of old age, I decided to take in one last student. In the end, before I die, I became the dead teacher in his words. Why should I bother?" Ning Ke felt like he was struck by lightning, but he still insisted on playing dumb and pretending that he did not understand. The headmaster looked at him and smiled. He said, "You are really good at playing dumb. But your clothes are already wet, and your feet are about to crush that stone. Why are you still pretending?" Ning Ke was like a broken wine jar when he was directly exposed. He no longer had the strength to persist and fell to the ground with a cry. He desperately rubbed his cramped calves and soles of his feet. The headmaster looked at him sitting on the ground and sighed. He shook his head and continued to walk up the slope with the food box. The sigh was very light, but it sounded like thunder in Ning Ke's ears. He thought that the headmaster was completely disappointed in him. What should he do? He had gone through thousands of difficulties in this life, and he did not know how many times he had been on the brink of death before he finally walked into the back of the mountain of the academy and had the life he had today. Everything he had was because of this teacher that he had never met. How could he watch all of this go to waste? Ning Ke bounced up from the ground as if he had been stung. He ran forward with a limp and respectfully followed behind the headmaster. He reached out and wanted to carry the food box for the old man. The headmaster did not hand the food box to him. He looked at Tang Xiaotang, who was standing in the grass in a daze, and waved his hand to call her over. Then, he handed the food box to her. Tang Xiaotang finally woke up at this time. From Ning Ke's expression and the previous conversation, she confirmed the identity of this tall old man. She took the heavy food box with her little hand and looked at Ning Ke with a smile. Then, she happily followed the headmaster into the academy with the little white wolf. Looking at the tall and solemn back of the headmaster on the slanting stone steps, Ning Ke was extremely depressed. He had thought that, as the youngest student on the second floor of the academy, he would be the legendary youngest. With his ability to be thick-skinned, black-hearted, and sweet, he would definitely be able to make the headmaster happy and be doted on in the academy in the future. However, Who would have thought that the old man on the balcony of the building of pines and cranes, who did not look like a decent person, and who had been teased by him for half a night, was his teacher? And looking at the current situation, the headmaster might really take Tang Xiaotang into the second floor of the academy. Wouldn't that mean that he would lose his position as the youngest and naturally protected? Walking out of the mountain fog, they came to the cliff yard at the back of the mountain. No one knew where the headmaster had gone. Tang Xiaotang stood under a ginkgo tree and was enjoying the beautiful scenery of the academy's back of the mountain. Ning Ke walked to her side and remained silent. The little white wolf was running on the meadow at the foot of the hill. It had probably never seen such a green meadow in the wilderness. It was extremely excited and actually ran faster and faster, almost turning into a white lightning. Suddenly, a black bolt of lightning shot out from the side and instantly surpassed the little white wolf. Like a black rain cloud, it enveloped the little white wolf's entire body. It was the big black horse. The little white wolf was scared silly by the big black horse's imposing manner. Those hooves that were like big trees, and hearing those war drum-like hooves, it was so scared that it shrank into a ball and did not dare to move. Ning Ke sneered and was ready to boast to Tang Xiaotang, who was beside him. However, it was indeed not suitable for him to sneer today. Because in the next moment, the sneer that had just appeared on his lips once again turned into a helpless and embarrassed expression. Because the big black horse that looked rather imposing was actually a deserter. A big white goose was chasing from the other end of the meadow. Its movements looked comical, but it was extremely fast. Especially its high neck, it looked like the ancient crown on a certain person's head. It was extremely proud. Catching a glimpse of the big white goose, the big black horse neighed in fear. Its 4 hooves were flying, and it once again galloped towards the other end of the meadow as fast as lightning. It could not stop panting, looking extremely aggrieved. I actually regret it. Boo-hoo! This is the second chapter. The next chapter will definitely be very late. I will write it slowly. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.